10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
The Nurses Union announced its first ever UK-wide strike.
Good morning, it's 6 o'clock on Thursday the 10th of November. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel, Webster and Andrew Pearce.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The Royal College of Nursing has announced that its members have backed strikes in a dispute over pay, with action expected before the end of the year. It's the first UK-wide strike in the union's 106-year history.
And the Home Secretary, she's making headlines again. Suella Braverman has demanded that the police take a firmer line. Yes, with eco-protesters like Just Stop Oil. It comes after a day of transport disruption with climate protesters blocking parts of the M25.
And Matt Hancock has made his I'm a Celeb debut, facing both a Bush Tucker trial and an interrogation from his campmates. TV presenter Charlene White questioned the former Health Secretary over his decision to take part in the show whilst Parliament's still in session.
So do get in touch the usual way via Twitter or email.
So, our top story this morning. Nurses have voted to strike in a dispute over pay, with action expected to start before the end of the year.
It's the first UK-wide action ever carried out by the Royal College of Nursing, which represents around 500,000 nurses.
And it comes as the NHS faces what could be its worst ever winter crisis due to staff shortages and a potential twindemic of COVID and flu. Well, joining us for some reaction to this is the Deputy Editor of CapEx, Alice Denby. Very good morning to you, Alice.
Morning.
What is it specifically that nurses are asking for? Because it's it's not in line with inflation, it's above inflation.
Yeah, they're asking for 17%. And I think your viewers watching, however sympathetic we all are to nurses, we know everyone is struggling with the cost of living, and particularly we know that there are these huge structural problems in the NHS. But people at home, people working in the private sector are not going to be getting anything like 17%. I do think that that's not reasonable. And I think patients will be very, very worried about the impact this is going to have on their care. In children's hospitals, it's cancer hospitals, it's operations delayed yet again after the pandemic. I think this is, frankly, a bit irresponsible.
OK.
I guess the trouble is they've consistently been falling backwards with real terms pay. Their pay goes back. They see GPs get huge pay rises. GPs, the average GP, what's on 110,000 a year. Good luck if you get to see a GP, because I can't remember when I last saw one. Can't see them at weekends, difficult at the evening. Nurses work 365 days a year, 24/7, in all weather, rain and shine. And they're paid around, what, about £32,000?
I think there are other aspects of the pay. I mean, it depends where you work. That's actually, that's difficult to live on in London, but it goes further elsewhere. They also have more generous pensions than many other areas of the public and the private sector. That's not to say that there aren't, serious problems in the NHS. We've got hundreds of thousands of vacancies. People are leaving the profession at a rate of knots because it's, frankly, an unpleasant working environment a lot of the time. So we do need to look at the working conditions. But 17%, it's unaffordable. We know the state of the public finances. They just don't have £9 billion to give to nurses.
Yeah, and look, Steve Barclay yesterday, the Health Secretary, saying, look, we really do appreciate the work that the nursing community does, and he said that they've committed to accept recommendations of the independent pay review body, which is 1,400 for over 1 million workers. But as you say, there is a huge discrepancy between 3%, which is what nurses were given last year, and 17%, which is what they're asking for now. But there has to be an awful phrase, but a landing zone in the middle somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, basically they have to come to an agreement, don't they? I don't think we can, in all conscience, allow this strike to go ahead when we're already facing winter pressures. We've already got this huge backlog from the pandemic. I think they're going to have to meet in the middle.
Do you know, I think this will raise the debate also, should nurses be able to go on strike? Because police officers can't, army officers can't. Should nurses be able to go on strike? Should doctors be able to go on strike? We're talking about a minimum level of service in the railways by law. I wonder if that's something now people are going to have to look at.
I think they'll increasingly lose public sympathy.
That's what I think will happen.
And yeah, I think there will be increasing calls to limit their power to go on strike. I mean, they're going to keep emergency services going, but people, anyone out there who's got a chronic condition or an operation or a child, you know, people are going to be really, really worried about what's going to happen, and I think they're going to lose sympathy, as I said.
It's when also we can say, because there was no the nursing cover, wasn't it? Somebody could die because of this.
People will be in danger.
But is that the nurses' fault or is that the government's fault? Because the nurses will say, you've pushed us to this position, you have the power to solve this problem. The government have said, well, we're going to draft in the army to help us if you're going to strike.
Well, I think they should anyway.
Yes, we're on a war footing almost when it comes to the NHS.
Yeah, remember those hospitals we built during the pandemic? The Nightingale hospitals, which are going to be manned by... Why did we ever get rid of them? They built them and then dismantled them, put them back. Why not?
Why not?
Well, look, Alice, stay where you are, because we've actually got a nurse we're going to speak to, and then we'll come back to talk a bit more about this and some of the rest of the politics that's floating around today. But as we've just been discussing about this strike, this is all a dispute over pay. Let's bring in Sida Sharma. She's a nurse at the Royal Marsden, which, of course, is a famous cancer hospital on the Brompton Road in London. My understanding that essential services like emergency care and cancer treatment wouldn't be going on strike, but I looked it up. The Royal Marsden is among those that will be striking, and you yourself, somebody who's voted for this action. Tell us why.
So I'd like to start off by saying, first of all, that the decision to strike was not one that we took lightly, but it was absolutely necessary. We are demanding change for ourselves, our patients, and our future nurses. You know, nurses are exceptional people who are highly skilled workers and educated, and we have been undervalued and underpaid for a amount of years. What the government is failing to understand is that this isn't solely about pay. It's about staffing levels, patient safety, and the retainment of our staff.
I suppose the risk is if you're asking for pay rises, and we're not just talking in line with record levels of inflation, but a record, you know, inflation-busting pay rise, the government has a finite amount of money. It will mean, won't it, fewer nurses. If they do give you the pay rise that you want, they simply can't have the same numbers of people.
So in terms of where the money goes, you know, the NHS does have the money to fund an additional pay rise. However, the money is not being utilised in the correct manner. You know, sometimes we, when we are short-staffed on our floor, they bring in agency nurses to cover our shifts. Now, an agency nurse can be getting paid double, triple for a shift that I am not, because I'm a permanent member of staff, you know, so they have the money to fund this. And it's very demoralising for current staff that are working in the NHS.
Can I read to you something written by, in one of the papers today, from a nurse? She's Carmela Jacobs. She's an NHS staff nurse. She works in the northwest of England. And she says that the decision you've taken to go on strike will have devastating consequences for countless patients and their families. While emergency care will remain unaffected, thousands of operations, chemotherapy, dialysis appointments will be cancelled. She lost her mum very recently on an NHS ward, and she says, while some patients like my mum may now perhaps die alone or be left out with the tender touch of care because of this strike. Does that make you feel difficult when you read that from a colleague who's working alongside you in the NHS?
It does, and you know, none of us wanted it to come to this. I don't think anyone ever dreams of striking when they are a nurse. So I mean, I myself find it very difficult hearing stuff like that because this is not what we want. Unfortunately, we are being pushed to this. But I'd like to ensure the public that no emergency services will be cut off in terms of dialysis and chemotherapy. Those appointments, as I'm aware, will continue. You know, we will not be restricting these services. And, you know, unfortunately, in the NHS and in the current working conditions, people are already suffering. We are doing this for patient safety. Patient safety is paramount for nurses. This is what we come into this job for, is to help people and make a difference. And unfortunately, we feel helpless and unable to do our jobs properly because of this. And this is why we are striking.
Yeah,
yes,
well, I was just going to say, it's terrible to hear you say that. You know, everybody has known or themselves experienced the wonderful care of nurses in this country. Tell us a little bit about, you know, your shifts, your recent shifts, and I suppose post-COVID as well, the NHS under more strain than ever. And as we're seeing inflation rise and the cost of living rising, how has your life changed as a nurse in recent years, and how desperate are things for you?
So, in terms... At the moment, you know, staff morale is at an all-time low. I think the 2 years working with COVID has really taken it out of us. Most of us are burnt out. You know, a staggering amount of nurses have left the NHS this year, and we are facing an immense amount of pressure, both physically and mentally. And again, this all directly impacts patient care. And at the end of the day, we as nurses are advocates for our patients. And this is the reason why we are doing this. We're fighting for our rights and our patients' rights. And the impact of all of this is affecting us greatly. As I said, we have never dreamed of striking. This has never happened before, but we've been compelled to do so.
Siddhi Sharma, thank you for talking to us and telling us about your own experiences. A nurse at the Royal Marsden. We really appreciate it. Let's bring Alice Denby back in. What did you make of what she had to say? I mean, a lot of people will hear her talking about that vocation, that desire to care, but it's just they're at breaking point.
Yeah, it's very difficult not to feel for nurses, and especially when you hear them make their case so eloquently. And I thought that she did make a really important point about that the structural problems. I mean, the NHS does waste an enormous amount of money on these agency nurses, on locum doctors. That is a function of it being understaffed. And the point is that with a limited amount of money, if you're going to give pay rises to nurses, you're going to have fewer nurses. That is just going to compound the problem.
Yeah.
So, you know, and I'm pleased to hear that sort of the regret with which they're taking this action. You know, this is unprecedented for nurses, but I would ask them to think twice about the impact this is going to have on patients.
There was a report as well yesterday from Steve Barclay. He's done an audit. Over 400 NHS bureaucrats are earning over 100,000 a year. Some of them are earning 260,000 a year. Why? What are they doing? What are they adding to medical care? Yeah. You could probably remove all of those bureaucrats and the NHS would continue well, and that money could be paid to nurses. Yeah,
absolutely. And I hope that talk about those kind of essential structural reforms that are needed will maybe help with the negotiations. I think if the government can come forward and say, well, we can't afford this, but there are things that we can change, and there is waste and there is inefficiencies, then perhaps that can break this deadlock.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Suella Braverman. She was at the annual conference for Chief Constables, Police and Crime Commissioners yesterday, and she socked it to them, didn't she?
She is turning into my favourite government minister.
Well, some people be concerned by some of the language. They might think that the way she's sort of anti the rights of protesters is an infringement on civil liberties.
Well, I don't see that. I think this is the Home Secretary saying the police have lost the confidence of the public again and again in these sort of issues where we see they completely disrupt the M25, they're getting on these gantries. They've just got to get a grip of it and get a grip of it a lot quicker.
I think people are baffled as to why they can't take faster and harsher action on this. So my street outside my office was blockaded the other day, by Just Stop Oil. They sprayed paint all over the office next door. And they were sat there for hours in the road with police just standing behind them, sort of seemingly protecting them from the cars. And it was just baffling to me that they couldn't just move them along. And I get that you can't sort of just chop their arms off with angle grinders when they're glued to the road. But
that's we should think about.
I'm not sure about. But I did find it confusing that they were stood there for so long, seemingly taking no action at all. And I think the public have completely lost patience with this.
And these people are breaching highway regulations, so they're in breach of the law. So the police can move them and should move them, and that's what Suella Braverman's saying. And there's a massive crisis in policing confidence across the country, whether you're a woman. We saw what happened with Sarah Everard and the way they responded to the demonstration on the Common. But these protesters are making a mockery of the police.
Yeah, and as you say, it's not just their inability to deal with protesters. It's basic low-level crimes like burglary and antisocial behaviour that people have lost confidence in the police to deal with. And yeah, I absolutely think that Suella Braverman is right to say, you know, that the police must take action. But I think we need to be looking at the wealthy people who are funding these protesters as well. We need to be coming after their money.
Of the Getty family?
Yes,
indeed,
Well, they've got plenty.
I mean,
more money than sense expression comes to mind.
Who's paying these people? Where's the money coming from?
And why have none of them got jobs? Why don't they have to go to work?
A lot of them are retired.
Yeah, but also some of them are, you just know they're going to be middle-class trustafarians.
Can we talk about PMQs? So Keir Starmer, very sure-footed yesterday, really going after the Prime Minister over Gavin Williamson. And do you think he seemed rattled?
The Prime Minister?
Yeah.
Yes, I do, because I've written about this in the Mail today. He was desperate to keep Gavin Williamson because he did not want to lose a cabinet minister 2 weeks into his premiership. Remember when he became Prime Minister, that first speech on the steps of Downing Street, I'm going to govern a government of integrity. Oh, so we bring into the government a man who's been sacked twice, once for breaching national security, once because he was useless as Education Secretary, and brings him in with a reputation for being a bully.
Yeah,
and the bullying has caught up with him.
Yeah, I think this is perhaps slightly a kind of Westminster bubble story, but I think that the reason why it's important is because it says nothing good about the culture in Westminster, that the man who's known to behave in that way can continually seemingly fail upwards. He can lose his job twice and get promoted again. And I think that's why it matters. And I think hopefully his losing his job in this way will send a signal that this kind of behaviour is simply not appropriate in any workplace. It's not just politics. Every workplace has individuals like this.
Some of those texts where he was very abusive to the chief whip, he used strong language. I couldn't get worked up about that. Politics is a rough old business. What I had an issue was, what a sense of entitlement this man had, that he thought, as a former minister, he should be able to go to the Queen's funeral, and why couldn't he? And that's what it was all about.
I agree with that. I think it's a bit of a stretch to claim that he was bullying the chief whip. She was his superior at the time. But I think what was more concerning was what Anne Milton had to say about the seeming relish he took in finding out these dirty details about people's private life. This is the politics of the 70s and 80s. We really should have moved on from this. And that's why this story matters. It's not really a question of personality.
About people's sexual peccadillos. Quite a lot of those at Westminster.
Yeah, and I was going to say, a Westminster bubble story, but I also think it's interesting because it's exposed perhaps a chink in Rishi Sunak's armour, not just on the professionalism, but he looked rattled, I think, at the dispatch box yesterday for the second week really in a row. And we thought he was going to be much more polished as Prime Minister in that situation. You can see Michael Gove, who we know is briefing him, sort of almost rolling his eyes. I don't know who was frustrated with more.
And he can't keep wheeling out this line about Jeremy Corbyn. Look, Jeremy Corbyn was never fit to be Prime Minister, and Rishi and Keir Starmer, as part of the Shadow Cabinet, campaigned twice for him to be Prime Minister. But that was then, and this is now. Yeah,
I think Keir Starmer is very clearly taking the party in a completely different direction. I don't think that line of attack is going to work. He's going to have to find something better.
He is. I don't know why they don't attack Keir Starmer, why he's putting Tom Watson in the House of Lords.
Yeah,
He's a man who smeared very well-known Tory VIPs, alleging they were part of a paedophile ring, based on the words of a deranged fantasist who's now in prison for making up all these allegations. Propagated those lies. He's now going in the House of Lords.
He's completely unsuitable for the House of Lords, but it's very difficult for Tories to take that stance when Boris Johnson is putting 27-year-olds in.
And his brother.
And his brother.
And he put his brother in, of course.
Jobs for life.
Yeah.
Right, Alice Denby, thank you very much indeed. Always a pleasure.
Great
see you again. Right, the time at 6:18. Let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines this hour. The Home Secretary has urged police chiefs, as we've just been discussing, to focus on what she calls common sense policing and not politically correct distractions. Speaking at a police conference in Westminster, Suella Braverman said the public expects the police to be tackling crime, not debating topics such as gender on Twitter.
The Northern Ireland Secretary has denied resigning from the government, blaming a fake email sent to press outlets. Posting on Twitter, Chris Heaton-Harris described the claims as totally untrue and complete and total tosh.
Fake news. A 23-year-old man's been arrested after throwing eggs at King Charles and Camilla, Queen Consort in York yesterday. It's understood the protester threw 3 eggs at the royal couple, all of which missed. I was really disappointed to see that yesterday in York.
With the
really
King.
Disappointed to see that.
And I think he was one of these environmental protesters too.
Yes, yeah,
and
he was linked to
was it Stop
Extinction
Oil?
Rebellion.
Do they not get that Prince Charles has been fantastic? He was one of the first to campaign. One of the first letters he ever wrote with that familiar squiggly, spidery handwriter was to a minister when he was 17. It was all to do with fish stocks in the North Sea. And he's been consistent. Isabel, for 40, 50 years. He's the first eco-green warrior.
I actually had, for the first time in a long time, given that I work in television, you shouldn't really have these thoughts, but I thought we shouldn't give these people the oxygen of publicity.
Don't
even put a camera on because they're trying to get attention.
Yeah.
And it's just so wrong. And I did wonder whether or not they would have done that to the Queen.
I know, that would have been a real scandal if they'd done that to Queen. They missed, of course, which I thought was quite funny. But, of course, Charles would take it all in his stride because he's had all that before.
Yes, and he went back out on the beat, as it was, afterwards on a royal walkabout, so he seemed undeterred, but I just thought it was so wrong yesterday. Should we talk a bit about what's been happening in the States? I tell you who's got his nose out of joint this morning.
Is that big announcement now coming on Tuesday, after all, from from Donald Trump? The so-called red wave is more of a red trickle.
Yeah.
They've got the House of Representatives. We're not sure if they're going to get the Senate, but some of Trump's own candidates lost. And look what happened in Florida.
Yeah, well, they're not calling him Ron
DeSantis.
DeSantis, they're calling him Ron the Future.
He is the future.
He might be the next president.
Looks good. He had a huge victory in Florida. He's no fan of Trump's. Very nice, attractive family. No scandal.
Is it quite controversial, though, fair enough to say?
Why not? Don't we want a bit of
Don't we?
controversy? Otherwise, it's going to be bland. As long as he's not as controversial as President Trump was.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I suppose the other result of all of this from the midterms is that Joe Biden might go for a second term.
Well, Dopey Joe, really, I mean, that blunder the other week about his son and the war, and I mean, first of all, he confused Iraq with Ukraine, and then he said his own son had died in the Iraq war.
I know.
And his son died of cancer 5 years ago.
Yeah,
it's sad, but he's
name wrong.
But he's the most powerful man on the planet. He's got his finger on the button.
Yeah. But he's surrounded. In all seriousness, he will be surrounded. There are protections, aren't there, within their constitution?
And someone told me only last night, Mrs. Biden, the First Lady, is a real player in that inner circle.
Though, is it?
No.
She's not been elected leader of the free world.
She looks pretty good.
She does. She looks fabulous.
It's great,
in Philippines.
actually.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let us know your thoughts on all of the topics that we're talking about this morning. Get in touch, gbnews@gbnews.uk. So after the break, as Wales prepares for their first Football World Cup in 64 years, we'll be hearing from the team's manager. But first of all, here's your Thursday forecast.
Good morning. We won't see as much sunshine today as we did yesterday. It's going to be another blustery day, though, and a very mild day, and particularly mild overnight tonight. Last night, we've had milder air tracking in from the southwest, this warmer air enveloping the country, bringing with it also some gusty winds. These weather fronts also bringing with them a fairly wet day across the Western Isles of Scotland and parts of the Highlands. The rain persistent here and at times heavy. Also, that's where the strongest winds will be, but it's going to be fairly gusty wherever you are today. A bit of drizzly rain at times across North Wales, North West England, mostly over hills. For many, it will be a dry day. just predominantly cloudy. We could see some breaks in the cloud across the east. A bit of sunshine may see temperatures reach 17 degrees. But even where it's cloudy, look at these, 15, 16 across the board. Very mild for this time of year. It's going to be an exceptionally mild night. We will keep wet weather across northwest Scotland. Some rain pushing back into Northern Ireland, perhaps into southern Scotland as well. Some drizzly conditions for England and Wales here and there, but most will just stay dry and cloudy. The winds will ease a touch overnight, but still wafting in the mild air. 13, 14, the overnight minimum temperatures. That's above the average maxima for most of us at this time of year. So a very mild start to tomorrow. It's a similar kind of day, certainly for most of England and Wales. Generally cloudy but dry. Some drizzle, most likely over the hills of Wales and northwest England. But there will be more persistent rain for northwest Scotland, perhaps some for Northern Ireland too, and at times across southern Scotland, although again chiefly over the hills. Temperatures 16, 17 degrees, even across northeast Scotland. That is really quite remarkable. Saturday's a similar kind of day, although as the winds ease, it may turn a bit more misty and murky, and temperatures perhaps not quite as high, but it's staying very mild.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Still to come on the programme this morning at 7:15. We'll be finding out about SAD, or seasonal affective disorder. Dr. Michael Mosley, who suffers from the condition, will be giving his tips on lifting your mood in the winter.
And the new John Lewis Christmas ad, I can't wait. It comes out today, and we're going to bring you a sneak peek at 7:45.
And get in touch all the usual ways on Twitter and on email. Now, when it comes to Wales, traditionally we'd be thinking about rugby, but reaching the Football World Cup for the first time since 1958 has seen a surge in the sport's popularity in the country.
The team's manager says the side has never had the support it has now, so take a listen.
We've pushed so hard for Belgium last November. We had to get a point, 4 points at the last two games to get second place. That's how important we saw it. Winning that game, drawing that game against Belgium, knowing we'd confirmed second spot was really, really important to us. All right, the second one was the luck of the draw, but without our support, we wouldn't have. I believe we wouldn't have qualified. We've got a wonderful group of players and world class, some of them, but you know, we need that leveler, and our leveler is the environment and the support that we've got and that connection we've got. I've never seen anything like it. I've played for Wales. I've never had a connection like we've got now, and that's Amorohid, you know, that's the bucket hats, that connection that we've got. We're all one family. It's amazing.
Well, our national reporter Paul Hawkins has been in Wales, finding out how it's affecting grassroots football.
This is how success inspires. The Wales manager Rob Page opening a new 3G grassroots pitch at this primary school in Penrhyn.
3, 2, 1!
What's so great about football?
The audience and just watching and playing it, to be honest.
Yeah, is it better than rugby or...?
Yeah.
Why is it better than rugby?
Because rugby's physical. It's less physical.
One at a time.
It's less physical.
Yeah.
And it's just better.
Yeah.
You have more fun.
More fun than...
In
more
rugby,
fun.
you can really hurt yourself.
Tell us about your kid. Your kids are great.
Football mad, and I think this World Cup, the last couple of weeks, the excitement of the World Cup coming up, they can't wait. A lot of young girls have come into loving football.
Yeah. It seems like football's becoming more popular than rugby in Wales.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think what the Welsh FA are doing right now, it's working. They're really working with the communities.
And will you be watching Wales at the World Cup?
Yeah!
And will you be singing songs?
Yeah!
Can you give us a blast of a song?
Kiefer, Kiefer more. Kiefer, Kiefer more. Na 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 na. Kiefer, Kiefer more. Kiefer more. Kiefer, Kiefer more.
Wales have qualified for 3 of their last 4 major tournaments, and that success has driven the popularity of the game in the country. In fact, in a survey taken in April, football is now the #1 sport in the country, and 40% of children are playing it.
People going to the game, seeing their heroes, seeing the stars play on a national level will just inspire them to continue to play and pick up the game for the first time. It's also helped us develop facilities such as this. The qualification for World Cups and European tournaments has meant there's a windfall into Wales as a result, and we've been able to invest in facilities on the back of that.
And what do you think of this new pitch that's been... What did you play on before?
Muddy and stuff. It was all muddy.
And we've just launched the Cymru Football Foundation, which is a dedicated body for facility investment in Wales. We've launched 2 programmes on the back of that, which will support clubs and organisations to develop their facilities. It's a multi-million-pound investment that we'll hope to announce details specifically around how much very soon.
You're better. Well, what's your prediction for Wales against England?
60-0, to be honest.
60-0?
Yeah.
Is it cricket or football? Wales' first game is against the USA a week on Monday. Paul Hawkins, GB News.
It's interesting because Keir Starmer has made it absolutely clear that neither he or any of his shadow cabinet are allowed to go to the World Cup in Qatar to support England because he says of the human rights record and the fact that you can't be gay, it's illegal to be gay. But interesting, Mark Drakeford, the Welsh First Minister, Labour, and several of his cabinet, he's going to Qatar to cheer on the team.
Well, fair enough, I think. Yeah,
they haven't been there
enough.
for 60-odd years.
It's a big deal for Wales, isn't it? So we wish them well, indeed.
Yeah.
Right, from Wales and the World Cup to Australia and Matt Hancock. He made his first appearance on reality TV show I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here last night.
Their former health secretary, understandably, received a mixed reaction from his fellow campmates as he arrived in the jungle alongside the comedian Sean Walsh.
So let's speak now to former politician and indeed I'm a Celebrity campmate, Lembit Opik, about it all. Good morning to you, Lembit. As predicted, it seems as though he is going to be singled out, targeted and indeed challenged by his campmates.
That's what the show's all about, actually. Matt Hancock's already achieved 2 firsts. Being on the front page of every newspaper before he even went into the jungle, and secondly, being the first politician to be the main event for the show. I have to admit, I didn't achieve that in 2010. Not surprisingly, people are having a go at him now. Not everybody seems to know who he is, to be honest with you. But the ones who do, like Boyd George, had a strong reaction. I think he said he would have left if his mum had died. So this is the big test for Matt. Can he actually achieve his outreach? Can he rehabilitate himself in some way? I think, to me, that's the most interesting question for the next few days.
I don't think he can, because I think Lembit, he's going to be voted for. He'll have to do every single test So he experiences maximum humiliation.
Yeah.
And then I suspect when the votes come, he'll be one of the first off.
Well, we've got some footage of him doing his first trial last night, so let's have a little look at that, because I think you might be right, Andrew, but I suppose in terms of the public's view, it'll be how he handles it. And he was squealing quite a lot during this last night, which is good entertainment. And the public might fall for it. I don't know. What do you think, Lembit?
Well, there are two things. Gillian McKeith was in my year, and she fainted, or at least appeared to be fainting. As a result, she was voted in for every single trial. And I think, ironically, that's one reason she was fourth place at the end. She did really well, because she was great entertainment. Now, here's the dilemma for Matt Hancock. If he wants to look like he's a real tough guy, and he's not fazed by the trials, they might stop voting him for the trials and do what Andrew just said and vote him off because it's boring. On the other hand, and that's maybe to some extent what happened to me, because I got voted for the first trial because I was probably the most hated person in the jungle in my year. But I did the trial well, and so it wasn't interesting because Lembit didn't collapse and turn into a gibbering wreck. On the other hand, a lot of people just want to punish him, and they don't really care whether he does well or not. They want him to have to eat all that rubbish. Well, as well as eating humble pie, eat widgety grubs and everything else. So I don't really know, but I do think that people underestimate Matt. I think he's actually a more decent person than people make out, makes very human mistakes. But centrally, he's actually quite tough. So I would be surprised if he crashes and burns psychologically.
Did you scream in your first bush trucker trial, Lembit, like Matt Hancock did? Because he definitely screamed.
No, I didn't. I didn't squeal like a pig, as somebody told me yesterday. I was very intimidated by it, but I was doing the coughing one. You really literally do think you're going to drown and be bitten to death by the animals, but I didn't really react like that. I did have to do some other fairly tough stuff. The worst thing that happened to me, you can't see it on the screen, but I actually got bitten by a snake. First person ever to be bitten by a snake in the jungle. That was horrendous. But even then, I didn't squeal. I didn't swear. I have to tell you, the second person to be bitten immediately after me was Sean Ryder from Happy Mondays. He did use expletives deleted. He's a very emotional person. But maybe that's where I went wrong. Maybe I should have squealed more. Maybe I should have shown more weakness. Maybe that's what people want from Matt Hancock. Maybe they want him to look like he's a gibbering wreck and they go, OK, we forgive you now.
It's all entertaining anyway. Lembit Opik, really good to get your thoughts on all of this morning. I love that yesterday Matt Hancock was saying that the jungle was like a metaphor for his place of work, but equally that he's afraid of snakes. Well, and I thought he must have encountered
He's encountered quite a few there, yeah. It's the first time I've watched The Jungle.
Oh, right.
Ever.
Right.
Because I want to see Hancock.
Yeah.
I want to see him humiliated. I've known Matt for a very long time. I think he's insane to be in there. And when people get their head around the fact, of course, he spectacularly walked out on his wife and children, that awful clinch with his married lover in the white woman, with his hand firmly
Gina Colodangelo.
Because that clip will come up at some point. I think that's going to cause him more problems again with the viewers.
Yeah, and of course, don't forget all his constituents as well.
Yes.
Still on the payroll for MPs.
Yeah.
And that's what Charlene White was saying last night. You know, do you feel bad about that?
Well, what's happening about his parliamentary pay? Is he surrendering it? Is he going to give it to a COVID charity?
Yeah.
He should.
He should, absolutely. Let us know your thoughts. We're going to take a break. After that, back with the papers today with Freddie Gray and Emma Burnell. See you in a sec.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something good happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics. and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Okay, it's that time in the programme. Our favourite part, really, isn't it?
We like that bit.
Where we've got
Yes.
the associate editor of the Daily Mail taking us through the papers, and we're joined today with the deputy editor of the Spectator, Freddie Gray, and political consultant Emma Burnell. So good morning to you.
Morning to you both.
Good morning.
Emma, you want to start with the nurses' strike. It's on the front of most of the papers. You've chosen the Daily Telegraph to kick things off for us.
Yeah, this is a really historic event. It's the first time in 106 years that nurses have chosen to go on strike. And I know that I'm probably in a minority, but I think it's really important to think about why they've reached this point. Because it sounds like a lot of money, doesn't it? 17.5% does sound like an enormous thing to be asking, but actually that is a calculation that just takes them back in real terms to the level of pay they were getting in 2010. So what's happened is that we've got an enormous crisis in nursing. We've got a crisis of retention. People are dropping out like flies because it's been an incredibly hard time. And every year they've seen their pay squeezed and gone down. And what they can actually afford to do in real life is less and less. So they are basically asking to go back to a decent standard of living, not anything more than that. They're really, I know that this is, sometimes a hard sell, particularly given that we are so emotionally attached to what the NHS does, that when people are saying we're not going to work on it on this day, that is a hard sell. But I do think it's worth examining the reasons why they're going on strike.
I get that, but and nobody... I think they're tremendous and they do a great job, and they're not paid enough. Everybody knows that, and they've been exploited by governments for decades. But last year, they got a 3%, 3.5% pay rise. Most public sector workers got nothing. Their pay was frozen. And so they did better, and then they've had another offer this year, which I think it would come up to about 8% if they got the... but they can never get 17.5%. I mean, it's just not realistic.
Well, as I say, it's not... When you say not realistic, it does literally just take them back in real terms to where they were 12 years ago. They've been being squeezed. Nurses have been squeezed for 12 years. They were squeezed all the way through the pandemic. They were squeezed before the pandemic. There is choices to be made about what the money in the NHS is spent on. And there are also long-term investment decisions to be made. If we can't attract people into nursing and to stay in nursing, then we will have worse problems coming down the track than we've got now.
Freddie, is Emma in a minority in her view on that? Or do you think the public will be broadly supportive of the nursing strike?
I think this is a tricky one, because I think nobody ever wants to say nurses should be paid less or shouldn't be paid more. Politically, that's almost an impossible point to make. The difficulty is we require nurses to be secular saints. The problem is when saints want a pay rise. Saints aren't meant to do that. I think they are the engine of the NHS, and this is a very, very worrying strike. People have been talking about the winter the NHS is about to face. There's backlogs, there's problems on all sorts of fronts. This is coming at a terrible time for the NHS. It could mean another major crisis, and it's another important public institution. You talk about trains, or public service, that is breaking down under the strain, and all of this strain goes back to the pandemic.
Yeah,
and the backlogs.
A lot of trusts, they voted not to go on strike, nurses, so it's going to be patchy all over the country. But I think 178 have, and that is hugely significant.
Yeah, and maternity wards, chemotherapy.
Yeah, that's what it's going to mean. We've got the worst waiting list problem since the pandemic ever, and it's going to make it a lot worse. My fear is people will die directly as a result of this now, the nurses' union leaders would say that's the government's fault for not paying them enough, but that is the worry.
Well, many nurses will say patients are dying needlessly anyway because of the dangerously understaffed wards
and long term
are running on empty.
Yeah.
And long term, there are going to be more deaths as we lose nurses and are unable to attract more and are unable to attract
And the
talent.
other thing is the paramedics are going to be voting soon, and that they're already in a terrible position. They simply can't get people out of their ambulances because of the bed blocking, because of the care crisis in social care.
Well, an interesting angle in all of this, I think, has to be that the Chancellor is a former health secretary who had a reputation for being pretty ruthless in handling the NHS. I mean, how do you think that Jeremy Hunt will handle all of this?
Well, we keep hearing that the NHS has been ring-fenced, then we hear it might not be. I think Hunt thinks there has to be savings made, but they don't quite know where to do it, how to do it. I mean, the problem is the NHS thinks it needs more money. And the government is quite clear that austerity is coming. How can you do austerity without targeting the NHS, which has so much waste, as well as being underfunded in many areas?
And you still pick up the Guardian or the Sunday Times and see these wretched advertisements for a diversity officer at NHS, £119,000 a year. And you hold your head in your hand and think, why do we need one? Why are they paying them all that money when nurses are on £32,000 a year? And there's so much of that going on.
I think about all those ridiculous posters during COVID of the people dying and staring at you and saying, it's your fault. I mean, how much did the government spend on that?
I know.
Let's talk about Suella Braverman, shall we? Her new turn of phrase was institutional reluctance on behalf of the police to tackle the eco-mob. Quite clever play on a sort of famous institutional racism term there.
Yes, good old Suella. She's great, isn't she?
Yes,
she keeps delivering. She keeps delivering. I keep meeting people who really hate her, so I start to really like her. But she's ordered the police to step up in their duty to tackle the Just Stop Oil protesters, which is not an unpopular position. What I like about this in the Express is that they've got a vote. Are the police tough enough with eco-protesters, yes or no? And the no number, 0901 133 4441, I don't think anybody's going to ring that.
No.
I don't think they will get a single person.
They might get a few Stop Oil people to ring it.
They might, yeah. If Stop Oil...
Rig the ballot.
If any viewers are Stop Oil, ring that number, because you're going to get outvoted.
Emma Burnell, will you be ringing that number?
I find this whole thing a bit distasteful, if I'm honest. Suella Braverman attacking the police the day after one got injured trying to tackle a Stop Oil protester feels a bit weird to me. It's scattergun Suella. She just attacks everybody. I think Suella Braverman loves to shout about things because she can't do things, and that is the big problem with Suella. She makes people very happy with her rhetoric, not me, obviously, but people who disagree with me love her rhetoric, but the action ain't there.
But she's tapping into such unease about the police and the public. She's also saying, get off your internet screen, stop pursuing so-called hate crimes on the internet again, get out on the beat, deal with real crime, burglaries and mugging.
Well, I don't disagree with that, but she's in charge.
Yeah, but it's the police's attitude, isn't it? I mean, the Stop Oil protesters, we were talking to, what was our first guest saying? They were outside CapEx for hours, Stop Oil protesters, in the road. Why were they in the road for hours and end? Get them out.
Yeah.
And also,
they're
say
breaking the highway. They're breaking highway rules.
It's easy to say it's just words, and but words actually matter. And when they come from the Home Secretary, and the Home Secretary is saying, no, we need firmer policing on these protests.
I think the last thing Suella Braverman wants is success, because then she won't have anything to shout about. Make people happy with her rhetoric.
There'll be plenty of other stuff to shout about.
Endless supply.
Well, she's doing good.
Look, you may well think that, but when you say words matter, and then she uses a word like invasion and has to row back.
She didn't row back particularly.
Right.
Did she?
Well, the Prime Minister did.
Yes, but
on her behalf.
She didn't, and I've read the Hansard about that, and she didn't say it was an invasion of Albanians, but she said there is an invasion, and there are 40,000 people have already illegally landed in Kent. 40,000.
I'm sorry, but invasions don't tend to be people asking for your help.
Well, it probably feels like an invasion if you live there.
Well, listen, let us know your thoughts. It gets people talking, that's for sure. Where should we go to next? Andrew, you choose which you fancy on our list here.
We are going...
The Guardian, if you want. Or...
Yes, I'm fascinated by Emma thinks about obviously my favourite paper, Emma, obviously. But the red wave for Trump...
that massive red wave, the
tidal
Trumpian
wave
triumph.
that was taking him to the White House, didn't it? A bit more of a trickle.
Bit of a drizzle, really, rather than anything. Yeah, this is fascinating because I think the Republicans are in real trouble now. Midterms, the party that's not in charge usually have a really good night. It's nearly always a time to smack around the president a bit. A president in the middle of an inflation crisis should have lost big time. And the fact that he didn't, and the fact that it may be, we don't know yet, that the Democrats hold on to the Senate. They're probably going to lose the House, but not by a significant margin, not by the kind of margin where the Republicans can just absolutely run the table, get away with everything they want to get away with. And the big loser was Donald Trump, because even in the Republicans, where they did have success, the person who had the most visible success is Donald Trump's biggest rival for the leadership, Ron DeSantis. But the problem there is, even if the Republicans decide, well, Donald Trump's not our guy anymore, Ron DeSantis is our guy, there's a hard core of people who will follow Trump no matter what he does. And anyone who thinks under those circumstances Trump goes quietly and throws his support behind Ron DeSantis has not been watching.
We spoke to Dr. Frank Luntz yesterday, a famous pollster over in the States, and he had a really interesting theory that he thought that a lot of the Trump rhetoric about how the last election was stolen from him actually stopped a lot of Republicans from turning out because they've lost faith in the electoral system. And he attributed that to the fact that it was more of what was being called a red wedding from Game of Thrones rather than a red tsunami. I mean, do you...
I'm very interested in that. I mean, I think what's very odd is that the MAGA crowd have been saying for years that democracy is rigged against them, and yet they have turned out in huge numbers. And I think on Trump, you know, everybody's getting excited now that he's sort of, you know, he's on the wane, DeSantis is coming up. But as he points out very gleefully on his Truth Social, which is his Twitter, you know, he endorsed 400 and something candidates, and the vast majority of them won. I mean, only about 10 or 15 did not.
Yeah, but they were all in fairly safe seats.
That's true, but the point is they win the primaries against other Republicans. So, I mean, he is still the force to be reckoned with in the Republican Party. And I spoke to one of his advisors about, you know, DeSantis running and so on, and he said he thought DeSantis would be vice president. I don't think that's going to happen. But he said any Republican running against Donald Trump has a death wish. And I think that remains true even after these...
It will be bruising for DeSantis.
It's going to be
sanctimonious or you decide. Do you think, just finally, because we've got to wrap, but do you think that he might scale back his announcement on Tuesday in light of what's happened?
I'm going to bet that he will still announce.
You still think he will?
Yeah.
OK, interesting. Right, more from Freddie and Emma just after 7:30. But for now, I'm going to bring you up to date on the latest headlines.
The Home Secretary has urged police chiefs to focus on what she calls common sense policing and not politically correct distractions. Speaking at a police conference in Westminster, Suella Braverman said the public expects the police to be tackling crime, not debating topics such as gender on Twitter.
A 23-year-old man has been arrested after throwing eggs at King Charles and Camilla, the Queen Consort, in York. It's understood a protester threw 3 eggs at the royal couple, all of which missed.
And the Northern Ireland Secretary has denied resigning from the government, blaming a fake email sent to press outlets. Posting on Twitter, Chris Heaton-Harris described the claims as totally untrue and complete and utter tosh. Would have been embarrassing because they've already lost a government minister with Gavin Williamson.
Yeah. Also, we're speaking to him later this morning, so that would have been awkward.
Would have been tricky.
Transport workers are striking in London today with limited services on the tube expected. Members of the RMT and Unite union are involved in a long-running dispute over jobs and pensions, accusing Transport for London of rejecting its proposals to suspend the strike during talks. Now, every year, around 2 million people in the UK are affected by seasonal affective disorder, a type of depression that's especially prevalent during winter months, and there is less sunlight.
Now, but it's what causes the disorder and how do you know if you have it? Well, Dr. Michael Mosley joins us now to tell us all about it.
Good morning to you, Dr. Mosley. You actually suffer from this, don't you?
I do. I discovered while making a documentary about it around 3 years ago that I had it, which was kind of ironic. And it's quite common. and it comes on around this time of year. And as you were saying, it's linked to lack of sunlight, and it can only be diagnosed really by the symptoms you have. There isn't a blood test or anything like that. And it's that sort of persistent low mood which comes across you around this time of year. There was a Norwegian poet who said November, the worst 3 months of the year are November, November, and November. And that was sort of, a Nordic way of saying that this time of year is kind of when you get a bit gloomy. And it is persistent low mood. It is also very much, it comes on, it goes away again. That's what distinguishes it from other forms of depression. And strangely enough, it's also linked to a craving for carbohydrates. So if you have it, you may find yourself putting on weight at this time of year.
Oh, great. Just hate winter.
Any excuse. How did you realise you'd got it?
Well, it was, as I said, it was while I was making a documentary about it, and I have noticed that I do get a bit gloomy, and then I was interviewing an expert on it, and as part of that, they got me to fill in a questionnaire and give details, and yes, it turns out I have a sort of fairly low-grade version of it. But she said, look, I could tell you, you have all the classic symptoms of seasonal affective disorder, and why not try some light therapy?
And this here, you might notice next to us, and I'm going to switch on. I hope it doesn't scorch our viewers' retinas at home, because you shouldn't look directly. I'm trying to put this on. Nothing like live television. It's not coming. There you go.
It should be glowing brightly by now. It doesn't seem to be.
Do you want to have a go at pressing that for me, Andrew? I've got such long nails, it doesn't seem to be working for me.
Is it on?
It is plugged in, and it's not going on.
I don't think we've paid the electric bill, Michael.
But these sorts of lamps can be a really good treatment.
Glowing and glowing with light.
Yeah. We'll just imagine it's glowing brightly. Talk us through it. It's glowing brightly. What's it now doing to you, Michael?
Sure. So that should be producing around 10,000 lux of light. Now, in the studio, it's probably pretty bright, but where I am at the moment and in a typical home, it's more like 100 to 200 lux. It's pretty low light. So when you step outdoors on a bright summer's day, then you're getting around 10,000 lux. And that is what that lamp should be producing. And what happens is that then goes to the back of the brain. It goes through the eyes, it goes to different parts of the brain, and it activates areas linked to the production of melatonin and other things. And they think that it's also linked to the production of serotonin, which is a sort of feel-good hormone. And one of the reasons why people develop seasonal affective disorder is they're not producing enough serotonin. There seems to be a genetic component to it, but turning on the light absolutely brightens up your brain and brightens up your life, both metaphorically but also physically.
Well, guess what? Our very clever floor manager has snuck into the studio and done exactly that, switched on this light. And people can put these on, for example, at home, we've got one of these lamps, and I used to, I don't know where I've put it now, but a couple of winters ago, we put it on the breakfast table whilst the kids were having breakfast to try and boost...
In November?
All through the winter.
OK.
And I don't know if it helped. And can children be affected by SADS as well?
Yes, but it's more common, I believe, in adults. I don't think they've explored children so much, but children obviously get different forms of depression. The problem with SAD is how you distinguish it from other things like low mood or indeed more severe forms of depression. So if you really think that you have it, and as I said, it is persistent low mood, it is that craving for carbs, it's the inability to get out of bed in the morning, particularly during winter, and it comes and it goes. In other words, when the spring comes and you feel more cheerful, then you might have SAD. If it's a persistent low mood across the year, then it's more likely that you have depression. And along with bright light, there are things like, for example, seeing... having cognitive behavioural therapy or maybe getting antidepressants if necessary. But it's glowing away beautifully now. I can see that. It's shining and bathing you with light.
Yeah, I'm going to just put it on my face. Oh, that's lovely.
I know you
tan there. Don't look at it. Don't look at it.
I'm just tempted, Michael. Are you sure this isn't really just about some grumpy old men don't like winter?
Now, that has indeed been what people believed for quite a long time.
Right.
And I'm sure there are grumpy old men who don't like winter. Hey, I'm probably one of them. But no, there have been proper scientific investigations. They do brain scans. They measure levels of serotonin. It's a real thing.
Well, Dr. Mosley, thank you so much for explaining all of that and being so honest. Now I've got a justification for having extra carb portion.
And as you've lost your lamp, you can take this one.
Oh, yes. Well, yeah. Oh,
I'm not going to fight you for it.
OK, perfect. Thank you very much, Dr. Mosley. We're going to take a break. After that, we'll be talking a bit more about the upcoming nurses' strike and how it could actually affect all of us.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
The Nurses Union is announcing its first ever UK-wide strike.
Good morning. It's just about to turn 7 o'clock. It's Thursday, the 10th of November. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel, Webster and Andrew Pearce.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The Royal College of Nursing has announced that its members have backed strikes in a dispute over pay, with action expected before the end of the year. It's the first UK-wide strike in the union's 106-year history.
The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has demanded that police take a firmer line with eco-protesters like Just Stop Oil. It comes after a day of transport disruption, with climate protesters blocking parts of the M25.
And Matt Hancock, remember him, the former Health Secretary? He's finally made his I'm a Celebrity debut, facing both a Bush trucker trial and an interrogation from his campmates. TV presenter Charlene White questioned why he was taking part in the show while Parliament was still in session.
And get in touch the usual way. Lots of you already sending in your views this morning. We love to hear from you. We are the People's Channel. It's gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Now to our top story. Nurses have voted to strike in a dispute over pay, with action expected before the end of the year.
It will be the first UK-wide action ever carried out by the Royal College of Nursing, which represents around 500,000 nurses.
It comes as the NHS faces what could be its worst ever winter crisis due to staff shortages and a potential twin-demic of COVID and flu.
Well, earlier we spoke to one of the nurses who voted for strikes, Siddhi Sharma. She works at the Royal Marsden Hospital. Let's have a listen to what she has to say.
First of all, that the decision to strike was not one that we took lightly, but it was absolutely necessary. We are demanding change for ourselves, our patients and our future nurses. Nurses are exceptional people who are highly skilled workers and educated, and we have been undervalued and underpaid for a amount of years. What the government is failing to understand is that this isn't solely about pay. It's about staffing levels, patient safety and the retainment of our staff. The NHS does have the money to fund an additional pay rise. However, the money is not being utilised in the correct manner. You know, sometimes we, when we are short-staffed on our floor, they bring in agency nurses to cover our shifts. Now, an agency nurse can be getting paid double, triple for a shift that I am not, because I'm a permanent member of staff. You know, so they have the money to fund this, and it's very demoralising for current staff that are working.
Well, let's get some reaction to all of this from the Deputy Editor of CapEx, Alice Denby. Good to see you, Alice. This is going to be a really difficult negotiation for the government to navigate, because it is entirely different, emotionally speaking, I suppose, to, say, the tube strikes that we're experiencing in London today. Everybody at some point in their lives will be touched by the work of nurses. We need nurses very often to hold people's hands, whether they're giving birth or passing away. They need to be very careful how they handle this, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, you saw from CD there what a sort of sympathetic advocates nurses are for their own cause. And obviously we know that the NHS has a very kind of special quasi-religious place in British life. But the fact is that 17% is just not a reasonable ask. People watching this who work in other parts of the public sector and in the private sector are all struggling with the exact same cost of living pressures, and they're not going to get rises of anything like that. So I just really hope, I mean, and you also heard with what incredible regret nurses have taken this action. And in fact, it's not even the majority of trusts in England that voted in favour of this. It's under half. So I would just ask nurses to think again about this. I think it's going to put patients at risk.
It's a very powerful piece in the Mail today by Carmela Jacobs. She's an NHS staff nurse working in the northwest of England. She talks about all the impact it's going to have on waiting lists. But here she says, but I can't also help think of the other direct consequences in the wake of striking nurses, less dramatic than on paper than death, but still devastating. I'm talking about the hands not held, the small compassionate gestures not done, or the words of comfort unspoken to grieving relatives, as I myself was just a few months ago, because that's part of what nurses do, isn't it? They don't just put the drip on. They are, they're the angels, aren't they? By the side of people who are dying, often holding their hands as they die. Very important during COVID, especially.
Yeah, and I think there's a real risk that by taking this action, they will, you know, those halos will become slightly tarnished, because frankly, you know, if people are experiencing the kind of lack of care described there, their dying relatives not having their hands held, women in labour not having the kind of care they need, then what are they going to think?
Well, do you think that the public will blame that on the nurses, or do you think that a lot of people will see that it has just become untenable for many nurses? They simply can't cope with the workload. There's too few of them to go round. They're working beyond their shifts. They've been exploited, haven't they, for such a long time, because this is a vocation. Many of them go above and beyond out of a sense of duty.
I think exploited is not the term I would use. Nurses, they get paid above average wages. They have more generous pensions. They have good career progression. So, you know, while it's true that their pay has sort of been frozen, many will have been promoted and therefore have got pay rises anyway. So and as I say, 17% is just not affordable at this moment. That's £9 billion that we just don't have.
I get that, and I also think about the nurse if they have been exploited. GPs are earning £110,000 a year. Good luck if you go to see your GP. Very lucky if you do. My GP practice where I live never open on a Friday. Forget an appointment at the weekend. They're on 110,000. Nurses 30,000.
Yeah.
The difference.
And you mentioned earlier in the show the diversity officers and the kind of unnecessarily roles we have in the NHS, and the amount of money that gets wasted on agency nurses and locums. So there is structural reform that needs to take place. Instead of just a blanket pay rise, I think what the government needs to be doing in this negotiation is talking about how it can improve working conditions, retention, how it can make their jobs better, improve morale. And that's not just a question of money, that is a question of structural change.
I saw a figure the other day. They're spending, in Department of Health in England, £57 million on press officers. Their job is to try and put a gloss and a spin on what the NHS does. 57 million? That could have gone in the nurses' pot.
Yes, absolutely. It's difficult to justify.
Well, look, a few of you have been in touch this morning on this already. Paul says, I wholeheartedly support the nurses. Give them 17% or have no nurses. Steve says, whilst I don't usually condone strikes, I believe you can't clap for nurses one day and then slap them the next. Please, give them what they deserve.
Yeah, and Stephanie says, although I support nurses wanting to strike for better pay, 17% seems like a lot. They're not going to get it. They're just not.
There isn't $9 billion to spend on this.
No.
And the other problem is that, were they to spend that money on existing nurses, they can't fill the vacancies.
Yeah, and I talked to ministers yesterday close to this, and they said there's a lot of nurses who didn't vote for the strike, some trust where they didn't vote to go on strike. So how are they going to work that out? If you did go on strike, you get more money. If you didn't go on strike, it's very difficult.
Yeah, I think they're going to... I just hope that they will come back to the negotiating table and think again about this, because, as I say, ultimately, it's patients' lives that are at risk.
Let's talk about Suella Braverman. She's been accusing the police of institutional reluctance to clamp down on environmental protesters, and she says it's their duty to take a firmer line. You're cheering her on.
Marvellous. She's marvellous. More Suella, please.
I think what does seem strange is why the police can't seem to get a grip on this. So they have been given more powers to deal with these kind of protests. There are now, I think, unlimited fines for blocking a highway and up to 6 months in prison. But I don't feel like we're seeing those kind of penalties being put in place. And I remember some protesters blocked the street outside my office recently, and it seemed like the police were just stood behind them for hours, not doing anything, almost protecting them from traffic. And of course understand that you can't just let cars plough into them, but it seemed very odd that they couldn't just move them.
A situation like Hong Kong, where we have heavy-handed police stopping people that very sacred right to protest in this country. We had Emma Burnell in the papers this morning saying, hang on a minute, how could Suella Braverman say this when just yesterday morning, a police officer was injured trying to police one of these protests on the M25?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the right to protest is a very sacred right in a democracy, but that's not the same as a right to disrupt people's lives. I was reading in the Mail about a man who couldn't make it to the birth of his child because the M25 was blocked. That is not acceptable.
But we've got the strikes on the tubes today. That's disrupting ordinary working people's lives.
Yes, absolutely. And, well, I mean, that's a different issue, isn't it? The right to strike versus the right to protest. I feel like tube workers are much less sympathetic advocates for their cause than nurses are, and I think every time that the tube goes on strike, everyone just thinks, when are you going to automate trains?
And also the stop oil people. Look, it's happened again and again that fire engines are having to turn around, ambulances are going to have to turn around. People have been delayed getting mum or dad to hospital with dire consequences for people's health. And we saw that police officer was injured yesterday. When is it going to be? Someone's going to be killed.
Yes, yeah, that's
but you know what they'll
fear.
say? Oh, but climate change is killing so many people. They are fanatics, these people, in my view.
What about PMQs, Alice, yesterday? So Keir Starmer looking very sure-footed in his attack on Rishi Sunak, who admitted a bit more strongly than he did in his letter to Gavin Williamson that he regretted appointing him to his cabinet. But Keir Starmer wouldn't let it go, would he?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Keir Starmer's obviously becoming a more assured performer. He's got some great lines. What did he call Gavin Williamson? A cartoon villain with a pet spider. But I don't think that the line of attack on Sunak, that this shows his weakness, is necessarily the best one, because it suggests that he's got nothing else to go on. And obviously, divisions in the party are a problem. It's a problem that he's had to lose a cabinet minister so soon after appointing, but that is a bit of a Westminster bubble story. The reason why this matters is that this kind of bullying, nasty behaviour, these nasty little men losing their jobs and then getting promoted again, this happens in every workplace. It's not just politics, but it's a sign of a bad culture.
Yeah.
And that's why that story matters.
And the other reason I think it matters, because it really does go to the heart of Sunak's judgment, because there was so much evidence that Gavin Williamson, in his past roles, had been a bully. Look, he'd been sacked as Defence Secretary from leaking national security, sacked as Education Secretary because he was useless, but overwhelming evidence that he was a bully. He liked to play up to the character of Francis Urquhart, who was in House of Cards. And he had the tarantula in his desk when he was Chief Whip. I mean, for God's sake. So why did Sunak appoint him? He knew that there was bullying allegations made by the former Chief Whip, and he didn't find out what they involved. All he had to do was pick up the phone, and that none of this needed to have happened.
Yeah, it says nothing good about the state of the party that he felt he needed an enforcer like Williams in his cabinet. He didn't give him a proper job. It took weeks to give him a job description.
Yeah.
He was clearly just there to bully and harass people.
Exactly what he's there.
And
it's going to be his eyes and ears.
Yeah, and I think it does not speak well of his judgment or his strength that he felt the need to appoint
And his
Williamson in the first
judgment, I suppose, in question again, as I say, in the tone of that letter, saying that it was with great sorrow that he was leaving and that he thanked him for his loyalty.
You should have said, sling your hook, as my father
you've
would have
written
said.
in the Mail about this, haven't you? Because they met very late, the two of them, the Prime Minister and this Minister without portfolio, as was his title.
He came into his Downing Street study, very tense meeting. He then, so they get the letters out because he wanted it all done for Prime Minister's question. Then he goes off to a reception with MPs, puts on a brave face. But MPs at that reception were livid that Williamson had ever been brought back into government and couldn't understand why he had been. 2 weeks he lasted. 2 weeks he lasted. How long did Liz Truss last? Oh, yeah, she lasted 5 weeks. Or was it 6 weeks?
I can't remember. A couple of them didn't count because of the
Queen.
The funeral.
Yeah. Of course. I find it very odd that politics still seems to operate this way. It seems like something out of the 70s and 80s. I mean, you mentioned Francis Urquhart.
Yeah.
That you sort of go around finding details about people's sexual peccadillos and you threaten them. And I'd have thought we'd have moved on from politics operating like this.
Just as well I wasn't an MP going on about sexual peccadillos. That would have kept the whips busy.
It's too early for that. It's only 7:10.
Just
Alice
a joke,
Denby,
honestly.
always a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. Now, the eagerly awaited autumn statement coming, well, this time next week, isn't it?
Will, yeah.
And the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, is expected to outline £60 billion worth of not just spending cuts, but also tax rises.
Yes, so GB News' Gloria De Piero sat down for an exclusive interview with the former Chancellor, Philip Lord Hammond, to get his view on the upcoming statement.
So first of all, why do we have to balance the books? Because for years now, we've avoided this issue by borrowing. When I was Chancellor, my opposite number was John McDonnell, who had a massive plan for more borrowing. Liz Truss had a plan for borrowing to fund tax cuts. The markets have now effectively told the British government, whoever's running it, enough with the borrowing. You've now got to balance the books. And that means as the population gets older, and it's getting sharply older during the 2020s, we either have to pay more taxes or we have to cut our public services and shape them differently or fund them differently. So if you want to maintain the same level of public services, there will have to be more tax revenue raised. Now, of course, it's tempting to think, well, that's fine, so long as someone else pays the taxes. As it happens, I am broadly in favour of a windfall tax, so long as it's sensibly structured and only tackles the genuinely windfall element, not the cyclical ups and downs that you get in energy markets, because energy companies plan around those cycles of lower profits and higher profits over different periods of years. But where genuine windfalls are earned, I think it is legitimate to tax them. And actually, I'd be quite surprised if Jeremy Hunt doesn't move further on some kind of a windfall tax when he announces his autumn statement.
Can we, as a nation, afford to keep the pension triple lock? And can we afford, some people would say we can't not afford to do it, to increase benefits in line with prices?
Well, first of all, I expect that Jeremy Hunt's judgment in this statement will be that we have to go ahead with both maintaining the triple lock and the uprating in line with inflation, just because of the huge pressure that people on low incomes are under from rising prices and high inflation. But I do think in the longer run, there are two issues. One is around pensions. Is it really right that we should always uprate by the highest of wages, prices, or 2%? And I think that is quite difficult to justify, and not all pensioners are poor. So I think there is a case for looking again at the way we treat pensioners, and possibly for distinguishing the poorest pensioners from the great body of pensioners, some of whom are really quite comfortably off.
You don't like what he's wearing, do you?
Where's his tie? He's a former Conservative Party Chancellor. Call me old-fashioned. I mean, we went through all that with Dave, didn't we? Dave Cameron. We were no open shirt. But former Chancellor, big boy noise in the city. I just think it's respectful.
But very interesting that Gloria got that interview with him. We haven't seen hardly anything of him in recent
Very
years.
rarely does he speak to the media, and Gloria, of course, is the great one to do it.
Fabulous for political interviews. Exactly. And you can see that full interview tomorrow. It's on at 3:30, and that will be airing on The Briefing with Alistair Stewart.
Now let's bring you up to date.
The former Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, has joined the cast of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, and has already taken part in his first Bush Tucker trial. The MP, who, as we all know, has faced criticism over his decision to join the show, has been entering the jungle in last night's episode, with fellow campmates reacting with shock and laughter.
And talking of laughter, the Northern Ireland Secretary has had to deny resigning from the government. He's blamed a fake email sent to press outlets. Posting on Twitter, Chris Heaton-Harris described the claims as totally untrue and complete and utter tosh. And we're rather relieved, because aren't we talking to him
we're
later?
talking to him after 9 o'clock, so it'd be a real shame if he's gone. In other news, helpline advisors at the charity shelter say they're expecting a huge number of calls from homeless people this winter. The charity's already received nearly 95,000 calls over the past few months, and it says the cost of living crisis has seen those calls go up by 8% compared to last year. I've definitely started to see more homeless people around, have you?
Oh, yeah, definitely. There are around 5.5 million small businesses in the UK, and for many business owners, it allows them to do something they love and share it with the local community.
Well, however, the cost of living crisis means many are now struggling, and that's why this winter local markets are encouraging people to shop small and to shop local. Well, our North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper spoke to one local artist about his craft and the cost of living crisis.
My business is sort of local poster art, or hyperlocal, because I used to be a journalist. And one of my jobs when I was a journalist was a travel editor. So I used to go all over the world. And I've got a thing about posters. You can get them at Paris, Rome, places like that, the Great Lakes. What you can't get is posters of Urmston, which is a small place in Manchester. So I thought, well, rather than be global, I'll go hyperlocal. My aim is to make people smile with my art. It's got to be visually good as well, but it's also got to make them smile. People are going to shop on Amazon and other websites, but like my stuff, you can't get it at John Lewis. You know, and same with my other traders. It's stuff that you can't, it's not generic, it's individual, it's different. So yeah, markets are a great resource. It's challenging when it's cold, it's wet, it's windy. You think, oh God, why am I doing this? But on the days when it's sunny and the people are out, it's the most beautiful thing in the world.
Now, after the break, we'll be going through all the day's big sports stories with Paul Coit. But first of all, here's your... Oh, I was going to say here's your forecast, but apparently not. A bit later on in the show.
We know a lot about sport.
We are GB News. And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio
and online.
we're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Right, still to come on the programme this morning at 7:45, we'll be taking a first look at the new John Lewis Christmas ad. It's so nostalgic, isn't
I
it?
know, and it's my favourite shot.
It's the start of the season. Yeah, it's lovely.
Really is.
And this year it's actually raising awareness for children in care, so a really, really worthwhile cause.
And at 8:20, as the England's women rugby team prepare for the World Cup final this weekend. I didn't know about that.
I didn't know that.
Yes!
Something to shout
That's passed me
about.
completely by. We're going to speak to women's rugby legend Rocky Clark, who won the World Cup with England in 2014. Of course. You didn't know that?
I did actually know. We won in 2014.
Did we?
I did know that, but maybe we'll win too. That'd be brilliant.
I do know we won the World Cup in 1966, but
That's football.
Oh, OK.
Actually, of the two sports, I know a tiny bit more about rugby, but women's rugby not so much.
Right.
Anyway, luckily we've got Paul Coit in a second. But first of all, just to say, anything you want to contribute to on the programme this morning, let us know your thoughts at gbnews.uk. So Paul Coit is in the studio. Do you think we could win another Rugby World Cup, the women's, on Saturday?
Absolutely. You know, I don't want to... So I'm extremely superstitious, which anything to do with sport is. But we've got a fantastic chance. We're by far the best rugby union side when it comes to women in the world.
Wow.
They're playing New Zealand, and we'll speak to Rocky a little bit later, playing New Zealand in New Zealand, Eden Park. So New Zealand are the holders, but England are so good.
Well, what I know about male rugby, the New Zealand All Blacks, they're fierce, and they do that fierce dance, the haka. Do the women do the same?
You know what? You've done it. Last week, you asked me a question and stumped me, and you've done it again. Within a space of about 3 seconds.
I guarantee
I'm not sure
they
must do the haka.
Yeah,
they must do.
Actually, in the men's rugby at the weekend, Wales played New Zealand.
Yeah.
And my little girl, my husband supports Wales, but my little girl started doing the haka. So girls can do it.
And was your husband very upset
Yeah,
the fact that she was doing New Zealand war dance at the start? But yeah, I mean, and we'll speak to her later. So I mean, the World Cups that we're involved in, that we stand a great chance. So there's that. So the Rugby Union Women's World Cup. There's the Rugby League World Cup, which the men are in, which in the semi-final. There's the Women's Rugby League World Cup, which we stand a great chance. And today is the T20 Cricket World Cup semi-final, which starts at 8 o'clock, which England play India. And then topped off by the actual World Cup, the FIFA World Cup, the Football World Cup itself, which begins in a couple of weeks.
I just can't wait for that World Cup, can you? I'm so excited about it.
Well, I mean, I do get a little bit excited if we do well.
If we get in the semis, I did watch the final of, was it the Euros, when England played Italy and lost on penalties.
Yeah.
And
Look, you go.
So as I was walking, I'd watch it at my great friend Amanda Patel's house with lots of vodka, obviously.
Yes.
And as we were walking
Is this
home,
the England bandwagon you were jumping into, where you were watching it? I remember, right, yeah.
And my partner said as we were walking home, do we have to watch another rugby match? And I said, oh. As it's taken us since 1966 to get into this final, probably not for a very, very long time.
Listen, don't worry about the build-ups. It's the build-up, and it's always the games at the start. And then, should England start doing better, then you start feeling a little bit more excited, then a little bit more. It's a bizarre time because, of course, we're playing during the winter. Christmas is coming. It's unprecedented for a World Cup. So it's going to feel strange for everybody, but embrace it.
It's also going to be strange it's being held in a stupid country.
That is rather strange that it is being held in a stupid country, which does take a lot of the gloss off the World Cup, and we could go on about that forever.
Kingdom.
Yeah, well, that you can't deny. But what we don't know yet is who Gareth Southgate is going to call up for the squad. We've got an announcement on that today.
Yeah, 26-man squad. So there's already a 55-man squad, which is, I think, which even I'm in the 55-man squad. In fact, Andrew is actually a reserve for the 55-man squad. Right. There's so many people involved in this.
They're putting me on the right wing.
So, you've used that before, haven't you? So, the 55-man squad, that's only sent to FIFA. So, he's got that. And then it goes down to the 26-man squad. Now, this is the tricky one. And there's always, everybody comes up with their own 26. And there's always people that are thinking, well, is he in? Is he going to be out? And I think the main one is James Maddison. Now, James Maddison plays for Leicester City, and he is an unbelievably brilliant footballer, very creative player, and he's in the form of his life. Now, a couple of years ago, there was so many people saying, we've got to get him in the England side. So Gareth Southgate brings him in, and he gets one cap. And then after that, he had to leave the squad because he was ill. But that night he was seen at a Leicester casino, which did not look good. The fact that, so how well are you? And it seems to me that Gareth Southgate is very careful about personalities. He wants people with not only the players that are only great footballers, but have the right attitude as well.
Get him in the team. We need all our best
players
on the squad.
This is the way we're looking at it, and it's just get him in the side. And the amount of people that I've spoken to, I don't know anybody that actually says we don't want him in the side.
They're young men. They make mistakes. They're all very, very wealthy.
Yeah.
Sometimes very, very silly. But if they're good at football, got to get them in the World Cup.
You know what? It's as simple as that. It really is as simple as that. So whether he's going to be in, I still doubt it. I don't think he'll make it. I don't think he'll put him in the squad. There's other injuries that there's problems with, but the announcement will be at 2 o'clock. Okay. So whether it's going to be a big pronouncement or a proclamation or he comes riding down on a white horse and says these are the players, they actually get texts as well. This is the way they find out, because that was the other thing. You think, can you imagine being called up for the World Cup, how you would find out? And it was Eric Dyer, a player that hopefully will be in the squad. And he showed me the text once and said, well, there you go, there's the text. And it actually says, it's like a school thing, and it says, the FA would like to invite you to play for the England squad. Please don't forget to bring your boots and kit with you. Can you believe that? And that's what it actually said on the text from England.
Sometimes young lads, again, you know...
Yeah, they go, what did I forget? I can't play, I forgot, left my boots at home.
I think they've got staff, haven't they?
You'd think they'd have staff.
Don't forget to tell your staff to pack your boots.
Tell their people to tell our people to bring your stuff. But anyway, it's 2 o'clock this afternoon.
OK.
And also the Wales squad being announced as well. Your great friend Gareth Bale, of course, will be in the squad.
Is he the captain?
He is absolutely the king when it comes to Wales.
The talisman.
He is the talisman. He's the greatest player going back to the 50s, because Wales were in the World Cup. Last time the Wales... Do you remember we had Cliff Jones on?
What are you going to say? Do you remember 1958? And no, I do not.
I did change my mind.
I wasn't born.
That was the question for Andrew. But,
I wasn't born.
but Cliff Jones, remember we had Cliff Jones on, and Cliff, who played in the 58 World Cup, played against Pele, so hopefully we'll get him on again soon.
Brilliant.
So he's obviously supporting Wales, but Gareth Bale is going to be there, of course, because I know you've met him before.
Yeah, you're quite. And will England and Wales, are they likely to play?
Yes.
They will.
The third round.
Yeah, no, they will in the group stage.
They've said they've drawn in the same group.
Correct.
That's a bit sad.
So, but it's just the way the draw goes. So we'll see how things go. But like I say, it's a strange time. People are feeling very strange about how it's going to be, how it's going to feel, not only the fact of where it is, but the fact of when it is as well. But anyway, the squad is announced today. But also there was football yesterday. I should mention the football yesterday. Very quickly, Carabao Cup, Liverpool beat Derby. Everything seemed to go to penalties. Newcastle beat Palace in penalties. Blackburn beat West Ham. There were 19 penalty kicks that were taken during that game. It only finished about half an hour ago. It went on so long. So Blackburn managed to beat West Ham. Arsenal were beaten 3-1 by Brighton, which kind of softens the pain for me for Spurs getting beaten by Nottingham Forest.
But did Arsenal want to lose because they've got bigger fish to fry? Nobody wants to win this.
Well, Arsenal are top, but whether it's going to last, we don't know. But I don't think it's going to be the biggest disaster for them. They made a huge amount of changes, but yeah, they do have bigger fish to fry at the moment.
It used to be the League Cup, didn't it?
It was the League Cup. It's the Carabao Cup.
Drinks.
Littlewoods Cup, Coca-Cola Cup, Milk Cup, Carling Cup.
My team, Swindon Town, won the League Cup against Arsenal 3-1 in 1969. 8 years old I was.
Were you really?
It was our finest hour.
Really?
We've not had an hour like it since.
It's been downhill since
All
then,
downhill.
hasn't it, Andrew? It's been downhill since then. Yeah.
Third division they were, and Arsenal were the sort of
so long ago,
aristocrats.
it was just called the
division.
Water Cup back in those days. It was so long ago.
Right, we have to go. Paul Coy, always a pleasure. You're going to be back there, as you say. We're going to be talking to Rocky,
Rocky
the World Cup Women's
Yes.
Rugby champion, a little bit later on in the programme. Thank you. We're going to take a break. After that, Freddie Gray and Emma Burnell will be back with the papers.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak.
Stop talking. My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for The Briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, The Briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
It's 7:36, our favourite part of the programme, where we go through the papers. And this morning we're joined by the Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, and the political consultant, Emma Burnell. Welcome back to both of you. Freddie, let's start with what's happening in Kherson. This is on the front of the Telegraph this morning, and quite a significant day in terms of Russian humiliation yesterday.
This is a pretty significant moment in the war in Ukraine. The war's been going on for so long now that we sort of lose track of where we are.
War fatigue.
War fatigue. But Kherson, it's a very strategically important city. The Russians have announced that they're withdrawing. And this is a place that just 2 months ago, Vladimir Putin signed an annexation treaty saying. So it seems to be a great humiliation for the Russians. But what's interesting is a lot of Ben Wallace and others are sounding a little bit cautious about this because the Russians have been so public about this.
And the war... That's the point. Why would they be so public about a humiliating retreat unless there's something...
There's a bit of deception going on.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and this is a war of deception. I mean, the Ukrainians have been very good at using the media to actually bluff the Russians into things. I think the concern here is, are the Russians about to do something?
Yeah, it does. When I read about it, when I heard that the general was announcing what they were doing, I thought, there's more to this than meets the eye.
Well, although there has been the shift behind the scenes, hasn't there, where we're seeing Putin increasingly in a threatened position within the Kremlin, and I wonder if perhaps there's stuff going on with all of that.
It may be. We can only hope. But I do understand the caution. And I think, given that this is, as you quite rightly say, this has been, in many ways, a war about managing information. I think in some ways what the Ukrainians have proved to be really adept at is doing that subtly and cleverly and well. And the Russians sometimes come in with big size 9 boots and try to do it in a way that is so obvious. So I think there is a sense that, why are you announcing this? Why are you... it's not in the style of Putin's government to ever publicly humiliate themselves like this. If there were a withdrawal, you'd usually get a whole load of excuses. The other problem, of course, is that what they're leaving behind is an absolutely devastated infrastructure. So it's going to be, if Ukrainians are going to take that territory back, they're not going to find it as they left it.
Well, Kherson was one of the first. I think it's symbolic, isn't it? Because it was the first big city to fall. I mean, it's hard to remember. It's sort of 9 months ago, or however many months ago now since war broke out. But I think for a lot of people, Kherson represented the real impact of the Russian invasion. And this is perhaps the start, hopefully, the start of a big retreat.
Well, there's been changes at the top in the military. General Armageddon, General Surovikin, he seems to have a very different approach to this war. The fear is that his approach is actually far more Armageddon-orientated, i.e. tactical nuclear strikes, rather than a land war. So that is the great fear. We can only guess, really, of what's going on inside the Kremlin.
And Putin was out and about yesterday too, wasn't he?
Yes, doing one of his tours of hospitals where they tell him how great he is.
And of course, significantly wasn't asked about this.
Right.
Because reporters wouldn't dare. They'd only ask what they're allowed to ask, of course.
Well, Putin loves doing tours of hospital and telling people stuff they already know. And they have to pretend that this is a great revelation to them.
And they also have to keep all the windows bolted closed in the hospitals, because apparently it's a real thing. People get thrown out of windows.
Yeah.
It's a huge problem in Russia. It's a big cause of death.
Apparently, yes, falling out of a window is the most common cause of death in Russia.
Yes, I wonder if that's how Putin will die.
Well, yes. I mean, anyone who's seen Death of Stalin will know that's a documentary, not a comedy.
Yes, indeed.
Emma, let's talk about the front of the Metro this morning. I'm not talking about Matt Hancock, although he is a brilliant headline for them, but actually there's talk on increasing number of people relying on food banks.
Yeah, I mean, it's really worrying, particularly worrying this early in the winter. If we're going into the winter with people using food banks, increased to the point where they're not getting enough donations in now. And, everybody's tightening their belts. We're all trying to do our bit as much as possible, but they've gone up by, I think, over 600,000 new users, which is just terrifying. 1 in 5 of whom are in work. So this is not, people who are not working. People are in poverty in work. Lots of children having to use food banks. And people are now finding even milk is a luxury item that they're not able to afford. And that's just... that should not be the case in a country as rich as ours.
I think this will all feed into what happens next week, Emma, with the autumn statement, the financial statement, call it what you want, the budget, call it. And I'm absolutely certain that benefits now will be uprated in line with inflation.
I think
There's
you're
been
right.
an awful lot of speculation about that, because when you've got people, the number of people going to food banks rising, unemployment is probably going to rise too as we go into recession. So I'd be pretty amazed.
I don't think you could get not putting benefits up in line with inflation through Parliament. I think there would be too many Conservative rebels who would just say, no, I'm sorry, we cannot do that.
And he did say, and I think, did he say only yesterday, we're going to govern with compassion?
Yeah.
Well...
Yeah. I mean, I really hope you're right. And if you are, even as a Labour supporter, as someone who would like to see a completely different person in government, I will say that's a good thing that they've done. Because we have to. It's the bare minimum, but let's do the bare minimum at least.
Yeah, we're going to see a lot in that, but also I think we're going to see another windfall tax.
I think you might be right, yes.
For sure, and I think there could also be one on the banks.
Yes, well, it's been sort of heavily trailed in some of the cases. But again, a lot of Conservatives will feel uncomfortable.
They will.
Well, the more important thing, I think, is to drive down food prices. I mean, that's got to be done. We can't keep supporting people through a time of terrifyingly high increases in basic foodstuffs.
But how do you drive down food prices when you've got huge energy costs because of this war in Ukraine?
Wholesale energy costs have been going down. The weird thing is the consumer's not feeling it. And there's been no sign, really, no significant sign that the consumer is going to start feeling it.
I think it's because of these complicated deals that are done in the international markets on energy, where you buy it up front in advance for months and months and months. In some parts, gas has come down 60% on the wholesale markets, but we're still not getting the benefit. So when those contracts are renegotiated, we'll get the benefit. But those markets are just broken, aren't they?
They are broken. I mean, we feel the pain upwards. We never feel the joy downwards.
No,
I agree.
That's so right. And I mean, I'm getting used to empty supermarket shelves in 2022 in Britain. That's weird. It's weird that you go along and you can't find fairly standard ingredients. It's not like I'm trying to get something that's completely out of the ordinary. I'm getting used to that. It's not that, that's a bit unusual, but hey, there's a war on. We're getting used to it, and that's
a lot of that is to do with Ukraine because of the...
It is, but it's also...
The corn, the wheat...
Absolutely, and I mean, thank goodness that the pause in the grain the pipeline was only very brief. But there are a lot of these just-in-time chains of delivery are just falling over more and more. And I do worry that everything is set up in such a way that it just takes one shock and it all falls down.
Yeah.
Freddie, I've got to ask you, have you been watching?
I have not. I have not. I feel I should be watching.
I think you should.
But
I've never watched it before in my life.
I just got very caught up in these midterms in America this week.
Yeah.
But I do want to watch because I like despising people.
And do you like Matt Hancock? Are you a fan or a foe?
I feel pity. I've got a very Christian soul.
Right.
I feel pity for him because he's clearly not very well. He's clearly delusional about...
He thinks he's going to be loved.
He thinks he's going to be loved. And in a sort of completely crazy way, he might just pull it off because the British public love to torture people and then sort of fall for them because they're so
Well, they feel like he's paying penance, perhaps. That
it's very weird. It's a sort of religious process, isn't it?
But they haven't forgiven him over COVID, and they haven't forgiven him for the appalling way he treated his wife and kids.
Yeah.
Sorry to be old-fashioned about that.
I think that's absolutely right. And I mean, the thing about Matt Hancock is that he doesn't come across as evil. He comes across as a wally. And ultimately, I think the British might like a panto villain occasionally, but they don't like a wally.
No.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, the Times had the smart idea to send some people down to his constituency.
Yes.
And the quotes are quite funny. He couldn't be more... This is, what do you call somebody in 53-year-old in West Suffolk, saying he couldn't be more of a caricature of Alan Partridge. If I get the chance, I'd pay some money to see him eat kangaroos' anuses. I mean, he's going to get all the trials.
He's got another one to do tonight.
He's going to do,
Yeah, he's going to get all of them.
It's just so funny in Parliament hearing the words testicles, anus coming up all the time in relation to Matt Hancock, which is just, surreal.
But he screamed in the first trial. That's not a good look.
No, it was the other guy screaming, wasn't it? I think it was Sean.
No,
what's his
blame
face?
Hancock.
I think Hancock Lembit Opie said he was squealing like a pig.
Squealing like a pig, yeah. And his face was a picture when he realised he's been voted by the great British public to do the next Bush
I mean,
Tucker
what
trial.
did he expect? I mean, anyone who's just a politician, it doesn't matter whether you're a great politician or a terrible politician, the public are going to take their chance to have a go at the people in charge.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's fabulous. I'll be watching.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm going to get the app.
I'm going to tune
in. You're going to get the app. It's a bit late.
No,
Let's be honest, we're on early.
To make sure I don't miss any votes.
Oh, so you can make sure you punish.
Make sure you vote.
Let us know your thoughts on all of those
topics. Vote early, vote often.
Yeah, exactly. It's democracy after all. Emma Burnell, Freddie Gray, thank you both very much. We'll have more from them around 8:30 or just after. But we're going to turn our attention now to Christmas, aren't we?
Oh, yes, it's John Lewis time. Their Christmas advert. It's a great event.
It's iconic.
Of the season. It is. It's been released, and let's warn you, it's going to be another tearjerker.
Well, the retail giants have become known for their annual campaign, a TV moment that for some marks the start of the festive season. So let's have a little taster of that new advert.
You're right, best trip, always. I know you'll be at my show, watching, waiting.
How did it go?
Nailed it. Say it ain't so. I will not go. Turn the lights off.
Well, I'm pleased to say we are joined by the Executive Director of John Lewis, that's Pippa Wicks, and Imran Hussain, who's the Director of Policy at Action for Children. A very warm welcome to both of you. A big day for John Lewis, Pippa, a real iconic moment. We've been looking forward to this, haven't we?
Yeah.
Good morning. Yeah, it's lovely. It's a very special day for us. And we're thrilled to be partnering with Action for Children and Who Cares Scotland and using our lovely sort of platform with the Christmas ad, which reaches over 20 million viewers, to just raise awareness of the issues around care, social care, and what it's like to be a care-experienced young adult. So obviously, it's much more than an ad. This is a really long-term commitment from John Lewis. And John Lewis's history, is a long one of tackling societal inequality. And we just felt this was the time to speak out about what it's like to be in care and to get the government to respond quickly. There's been an independent review, and we're really wanting them to take some action on the back of that. We need to use the unspent apprentice levy to help people from care get into work. We need to stop unregulated homes, end this care cliff where people no longer have support as young adults, get much more stability so that they've got steady environments and can maintain relationships and connections. So we're just hoping that the timeliness of the ad relative to the government response to the inquiry, the opportunity to raise awareness across a big platform, makes a big difference.
Well, Imran Hussain joins us from Action for Children. You must be delighted that John Lewis has chosen to partner with you. Just give us a sense then, I suppose, the human side to what Pippa was describing there, of what it is like for people coming through the care sector in the UK.
Sure. The first thing to say is we definitely were delighted that John Lewis, has got this iconic, it's an iconic cultural moment, and it's choosing to work with us to kind of give a platform to the voices of children in the care system. So we're thrilled about that. But I think what we're really thrilled about is the fact that this isn't just for Christmas. John Lewis is working with us, working with other charities to help support young people leaving care to move in to adult life and kind of get the right start in their adult life when perhaps they didn't get the best start in their childhoods. And there's over 100,000 children in care in the UK. about 2/3, 3/4 of those are in the fostering system. Now, the reason why they're there is because they've been through horrible experiences, abuse, neglect, violence in the family. And we all know that the outcomes of children leaving care are not great. They're much more likely, 3 times more likely to be not in education, employment and training. And so this initiative, which is really important to emphasise, it's a long-term initiative. It's not just for Christmas. It's not just for this year. That John Lewis is working on with us and others is about helping young people move from care into jobs and build careers. And once you build careers, you can build families and for these young people to kind of realise their dreams in the long term.
If I can ask you. Have we got Pippa yet? Pippa, if I can ask you, we look forward to the iconic Christmas ad, and it's one of those wonderful, heartwarming Christmas
beautiful
moments.
Music.
But I was listening to you talking, very important what you were saying, but it sounded much more political than in the past.
No, it's not about political, really. The Beginner, which is the title of this ad, he's obviously learning to skate on a skateboard, and he's we haven't seen the end of it on your show just yet, but at the end, the family welcomes a foster child to the home, and she's a skateboarder, and so he's spent time learning to skateboard, so that when she joins the family, they've got something in common that they can do together. So it's about the power of kindness, actually, in a year when people are seeking hope. We've had 2 Christmases recently which have been really impacted by COVID, and it's about what you do that matters, not about gifts and products and too much of sort of stuff. It's about what you do. It's not political at all. We, John Lewis, have launched the Happier Futures programme. This is a long-term commitment to supporting care-experienced young adults with work opportunities and apprenticeships, if they'd like that, with John Lewis. But we also welcome other businesses to join in partnership with us if they'd like to on this, because the more of us that get involved in supporting these young people, the more difference we can make, the more support we can get.
Presumably you can't do that. You can't have these apprenticeships. You can't support these initiatives if you don't have people buying stuff and products, which I suppose at the end of the day is what you really want people to do.
Yeah, people are buying products and they do buy stuff, and that's important. And in fact, 25% of a number of our products, the sales of those products will go towards our Happier Futures programme fund, which we will be doing over many, many years now and building. So it's, of course, buying things. People are buying much more thoughtfully this year. They're really, people are very hard up. You've just talked about food banks, which we also support through Fair Share. But, life is really tough for most families at the moment. They're buying more thoughtfully. But it's not just about stuff. It's about what you do that matters.
OK, well, Pippa Wicks expressing a big social conscience on behalf of John Lewis and partners as they announced their Christmas advert. Thank you to Imran Hussain for highlighting what is undoubtedly a very difficult path for young people who have to come up through foster care. Thank you both very much indeed for your time. I should say the music to that advert is a cover of Blink-182's All the Small Things, which is a sort of iconic 90s rock anthem. And the music is all, but it's sort of in a sort of, I don't know what the correct musical term is, but it's sort of a Christmassy version of it. Sort of
nice
highlight
and seasonal.
that.
And don't forget, we'll have more on the nurses' strike and the Home Secretary's comments on Just Stop Oil. You might welcome them after this.
Good morning. We won't see as much sunshine today as we did yesterday. It's going to be another blustery day, though, and a very mild day, and particularly mild overnight tonight. Last night, we've had milder air tracking in from the southwest, this warmer air enveloping the country, bringing with it also some gusty winds. These weather fronts also bringing with them a fairly wet day across the Western Isles of Scotland and parts of the Highlands. The rain persistent here and at times heavy. Also, that's where the strongest winds will be, but it's going to be fairly gusty wherever you are today. A bit of drizzly rain at times across North Wales, North West England, mostly over hills. For many, it will be a dry day. just predominantly cloudy. We could see some breaks in the cloud across the east. A bit of sunshine may see temperatures reach 17 degrees. But even where it's cloudy, look at these, 15, 16 across the board. Very mild for this time of year. It's going to be an exceptionally mild night. We will keep wet weather across northwest Scotland. Some rain pushing back into Northern Ireland, perhaps into southern Scotland as well. Some drizzly conditions for England and Wales here and there, but most will just stay dry and cloudy. The winds will ease a touch overnight, but still wafting in the mild air. 13, 14, the overnight minimum temperatures. That's above the average maxima for most of us at this time of year. So a very mild start to tomorrow. It's a similar kind of day, certainly for most of England and Wales. Generally cloudy but dry. Some drizzle, most likely over the hills of Wales and northwest England. But there will be more persistent rain for northwest Scotland, perhaps some for Northern Ireland too, and at times across southern Scotland, although again chiefly over the hills. Temperatures 16, 17 degrees, even across northeast Scotland. That is really quite remarkable. Saturday's a similar kind of day, although as the winds ease, it may turn a bit more misty and murky, and temperatures perhaps not quite as high, but it's staying very mild.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio and online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
The Nurses Union announced its first ever UK-wide strike.
Well, good morning to you. It's 8 o'clock on Thursday, the 10th of November. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel, Webster and Andrew Pearce.
Here's what's leading our news this morning. The Royal College of Nursing has announced that its members have backed strikes in a dispute over pay, with action expected before the end of the year. It's the first UK-wide strike in the union's 106-year history.
And the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, she's making headlines again, headlines which I thoroughly approve of. She's demanding that the police take a firmer line with those eco-protesters like Just Stop Oil. It comes after another day of transport disruption, with those climate protesters blocking parts of the M25 again.
Matt Hancock made his I'm a Celeb debut last night, facing both a Bush-Tucker trial and interrogation from his campmates. The TV presenter Charlene White questioned him on why he was taking part whilst Parliament was still in session.
And England is set to face off against New Zealand this Saturday in the Women's Rugby World Cup. We're going to be speaking to a 2014 Rugby World Cup champion, Rocky Clark, ahead of that final.
And as always, we love to hear from you throughout the programme. Get in touch the usual way, via Twitter or via email. So our top story this hour, and as you know, nurses have voted to strike in a dispute over pay, with action expected to start before the end of the year.
It's the first ever UK-wide action carried out by the Royal College of Nursing, which represents around 500,000 nurses.
And it comes as the NHS faces what could be its worst ever winter crisis due to staff shortages and a potential twindemic of COVID and flu. Well, here with us in the studio is former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall. Look, this is really delicate for the government to manage, isn't it? Because, of course, everybody has sympathy. It's a very emotive topic, and I suppose quite rightly so, because these are people we ask to hold our hands in our dying moments, or as people are giving birth, born into the world.
That's right, and I think people understand that nurses need to be appreciated, need to be paid a proper wage, but I think where we can draw the line is a strike. I think most people want to be seen by their GP, seen at their hospital, and unfortunately the services that will be affected are those community nursing services. Things like cancer treatments will be delayed, even though some of the services will go ahead, and of course emergency care will still be there. So I think it's a really tricky one for the government, because you don't ever want to appear unsympathetic to those people that we all stood out there and clapped for. But on the other hand, the unions asking for a 5% above inflation rise is unrealistic and just puts them on that collision course with the government.
If they'd gone for something much more reasonable, Claire, 17%, completely unrealistic. That would be £9 billion. That's got to come from somewhere else, because it's public money, taxpayers' money. Might there be more sympathy, do you think?
I think there would be more sympathy. I think everybody has sympathy. And the problem is when you start to look at finances and say, well, where are you going to get the money from? Where's it coming from? You get the argument back at you, well, the government can find money for things like HS2, PPE contracts and all of those other things that the government has spent money on, and wonder why you can find that. You can find money for a yacht, which was a vanity project, but you can't find it to fund nurses. And I think that's the real difficulty, is trying to understand where the public fit in all of this. They don't want to be affected by strikes. They want people to be paid fairly, but that unrealistic expectation of sort of 17% just knocks it on the head.
I wonder as well if the government are thinking about the PR strategy here, because Steve Barclay, the new Health Secretary, he's done this audit which is exposing more and more increases in numbers of middle managers, and only the other day the audit exposed hundreds of NHS bureaucrats, they're not involved in providing medicine, earning more than £100,000, some of them earning £260,000. People watching this will think, no, they don't. If they got rid of that whole raft of bureaucrats, the NHS probably function perfectly well, and that money could go directly to help nurses or to cut waiting lists.
But I think there is an argument now to look at wastage in the NHS as a whole. You need to look at the entire institution. Its buying powers should be better than they are. You shouldn't have as many middle managers. It needs a proper root and branch review. But politically, that is such a hot potato. Anybody that goes anywhere near it gets accused of either trying to sell it off or privatise it. But I think people are more coming around to the fact that it doesn't work at the moment. It is overloaded.
I think the problem is if you don't pay nurses properly, they won't stay in the profession, and then you create a greater problem within the National Health Service. And there has to be an acknowledgement that there is a problem with retention. There is already a problem with shortages on the wards, quite frankly, very often at unsafe levels where patients are already facing their lives in question.
Yeah, and I think we ought to look at perhaps how we train nurses, the degree process. Do we need this sort of level of a degree? Because most people who are nurses are so acutely good at what they do, and they care and they have empathy, and the practical side of it, they're excellent. They don't need a degree to do that. So I wonder if that perhaps puts some people off wanting to be in the nursing profession.
I think they also have to pay a lot of their own training costs.
Yeah, they do, and that puts a lot of people into debt when they can least afford it. So I think we all need to look at where that goes from here, and hopefully Steve Barclay will start looking at that and looking at the retention issues, because you're quite right. The reliance upon agency staff is enormous in the NHS, and you can understand why some people would look to agency work to earn more money, but that doesn't help the process in hospitals and in the community at this time.
Should we talk about Suella Braverman? You're thrilled with the way she was addressing police conferences yesterday. What was she saying? What did you make of it all?
She wants to crack down on the eco-protesters. And I'm with Andrew on this. We disagree quite often with Suella Braverman, but I think this is absolutely spot on. I saw my own part of the county of Kent gridlocked for 2 days due to people on the gantries of the M25. Now, that stops all of the traffic in the surrounding area, people getting to school, going to hospital, and the police unable to do anything about it. And too often we've seen
unable to do anything about it? I mean, she's talking about this institutional reluctance, but at the same time, we also had a police officer injured yesterday on one of the M25 gantries. I mean, they are putting themselves in harm's way.
They do, and I think when you're looking at overhead gantries, that's a really dangerous piece, and the M25 on the suspension bridge, that was particularly dangerous, and you can understand the police would stand there. But I think they need to be a lot more robust when it comes to people who have glued themselves to concrete on the road. You need to be able to move them fast, not give them a cup of tea and some warm words.
And ask them if they're OK. They are breaking the law. They're breaking highway laws, so they can be carted off and should be and if it hurts their poor little hands, tough.
When you see them in other countries removing them from concrete, they are not quite as caring in that respect, are they? They just make the highways open again.
That's what she's trying to say. They've got to be more robust, because there is already a real crisis of confidence in this country in how the police operate. You're thinking about Sarah Everard, the women's attitude to the police, and this is draining public confidence in the police. So she's right.
And also when you look at journalists then being arrested and you think, which way is this going?
That was an LBC reporter yesterday.
Yes, absolutely, and that was awful.
OK, stay where you are, Claire. I want to bring in our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, and stay on the topic of politics. Rishi Sunak yesterday. How did you think he came off in all of this? Because we've been talking about it this morning. I think, actually, it was a bit of a win for Sir Keir Starmer.
I think that's exactly what it was. Rishi Sunak appeared weak at the dispatch box, and it was interesting just imagining how the variety of ways Rishi Sunak could have responded to the charge that Sir Keir Starmer laid on him. Of course, going on Gavin Williamson and the whole scandal surrounding his resignation. It's easy to imagine how Boris Johnson might have stood there at the dispatch box and gone, why is the leader of the opposition talking about someone who's already resigned? This is something that's already a shut case, blah, 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 blah. Instead, Rishi Sunak saw himself on the back foot, almost apologising and then facing that charge of weakness. It was a curious moment where Sir Keir Starmer really had the roars of the Commons behind him and Rishi Sunak very much on the back foot.
Yeah, difficult. What did you make of it all?
He's got to come up with a better line, Tom, too. Then every time Starmer goes to him, he throws back, well, you tried to get Jeremy Corbyn into number 10. You were in his shadow. Well, that's worked once or twice, but that's becoming very tired. He's got to have a better line. There's another line of attack he could have done. Don't take lectures from you, mate. You're putting Tom Watson in the House of Lords, a man who's smeared many prominent public figures, falsely alleging they were part of a paedophile ring, which wasn't true, and his apology has been grudging. Why is he going in the House of Lords?
There are so many different arguments that Rishi Sunak could have made from that dispatch box, but he did seem a little bit vacant yesterday. There was a moment, I think it was about the fourth question of Sir Keir Starmer, where Rishi Sunak appeared to not know that it was his turn to speak, to stand up, to fight back. And I think that many people will be raising an eyebrow there. Rishi Sunak, a very slick performer in front of the cameras, but when it comes to the rough and tumble of the Commons and at that dispatch box, he's not that much of a natural parliamentary performer.
And of course, the trouble was in the Commons chamber for him, Tom. A lot of Tory MPs are thinking, why on earth did you bring Gavin Williamson back into the Cabinet in the first place? Sacked twice, once for breaching national security when he was Defence Secretary. That should have sunk his career. Second time he was sacked because he was a useless Education Secretary. Brought back, even though there's bullying allegations against him, he says to the Commons, well, I didn't know the detail. Find out what the detail of the bullying allegations
the tone
are.
of the letter when he accepted his resignation was tone deaf to the mood of the nation.
Let's not forget from where many of these stories about Gavin Williamson was coming. Of course, the first one, Wendy Morton, former Chief Whip, of course, Tory MP, submitted that complaint. We also saw former Northern Ireland Secretary, former Justice Secretary as well, Brandon Lewis, making less than subtle comments online about bullying. We saw Jake Berry, the former chairman of the party, come out into the media to say that he told Rishi Sunak of these complaints. There are many people on the Tory benches who were upset at the appointment of Gavin Williamson, and perhaps people who might be less than comfortable with Rishi Sunak's governorship of the party.
They're using it, aren't they, as a way to
and it may well be a lever.
I think so.
Thank you very much, Tom, for that analysis. Claire, just a final thought from you on the performance of the Prime Minister at PMQs. Does it matter?
Of course it matters. Absolutely, because this is the thing that people tune into. It's half an hour of theatre, which everybody watches. It's absolutely vital that he gets it right. And he just seemed off his game yesterday. He is much better than that normally. So I think Keir Starmer did a very good job of it, but Rishi Sunak let him do that.
Yeah, interesting. OK, Claire Purcell, Tom Harwood, thank you both.
So the eagerly awaited autumn statement finally arrives next Thursday, with the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, expected to outline £60 billion worth of spending cuts and tax rises.
Well, GB News' Gloria De Piero has sat down for an exclusive interview with the former Chancellor, Philip Hammond. Remember him? Long time since we've really seen him on our screens. She's got this big interview. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
So first of all, why do we have to balance the books? Because for years now, we've avoided this issue by borrowing. When I was Chancellor, my opposite number was John McDonnell, who had a massive plan for more borrowing. Liz Truss had a plan for borrowing to fund tax cuts. The markets have now effectively told the British government, whoever's running it, enough with the borrowing. You've now got to balance the books. And that means as the population gets older, and it's getting sharply older during the 2020s, we either have to pay more taxes or we have to cut our public services and shape them differently or fund them differently. So if you want to maintain the same level of public services, there will have to be more tax revenue raised. Now, of course, it's tempting to think, well, that's fine, so long as someone else pays the taxes. As it happens, I am broadly in favour of a windfall tax, so long as it's sensibly structured and only tackles the genuinely windfall element, not the cyclical ups and downs that you get in energy markets, because energy companies plan around those cycles of lower profits and higher profits over different periods of years. But where genuine windfalls are earned, I think it is legitimate to tax them. And actually, I'd be quite surprised if Jeremy Hunt doesn't move further on some kind of a windfall tax when he announces his autumn statement.
Can we, as a nation, afford to keep the pension triple lock? And can we afford, some people would say we can't not afford to do it, to increase benefits in line with prices?
Well, first of all, I expect that Jeremy Hunt's judgment in this statement will be that we have to go ahead with both maintaining the triple lock and the uprating in line with inflation, just because of the huge pressure that people on low incomes are under from rising prices and high inflation. But I do think in the longer run, there are two issues. One is around pensions, is it really right that we should always uprate by the highest of wages, prices, or 2%? And I think that is quite difficult to justify, and not all pensioners are poor. So I think there is a case for looking again at the way we treat pensioners, and possibly for distinguishing the poorest pensioners from the great body of pensioners, some of whom are really quite comfortably off.
Well, there we go, a little snippet of that exclusive interview that Gloria De Piero managed to bag, because we haven't seen him for a while. So it's a good get from
that's a
her.
very good. He doesn't do many interviews at all, actually.
And you can watch the full interview tomorrow. That will be airing at 3:30 on The Briefing with Alistair Stewart, although you were taking umbrage at his lack of tie.
Sorry, why can't he wear a tie? He's a former
quite
Chancellor
modern.
of the
It's quite
Exchequer. He's a
modern.
member of the House. Nothing modern about Philip Hammond.
Man of the
Trust
people.
me. He's none of that. He's a grey, boring, but he was fairly effective Chancellor, and I've never seen him not wearing a tie.
Well, there you go, seeing it first right here
Someone's
on
told him,
YouView.
someone's told him he's looking cool. Perhaps he's wanted to go in celebrity.
Well,
in
maybe.
the jungle.
Oh gosh, can you imagine? It
No.
could be the start of a whole host of
He'd walk
former.
in and nobody would recognise him.
You're probably right. Talking of I'm a Celebrity, we've had a view in from Elaine. She says, if the media make this series all about Matt Hancock, then I should be switching off.
I'm afraid
it's
we
not all about one person. It will simply get boring. I suppose it is quite a sort of Westminster obsession, the Matt Hancock.
And of course, Boy George, who's the big star, is, I'm afraid, being totally upstaged by Matt Hancock. He really
And he's
is.
been paid a lot more than Matt
He is being
Hancock,
paid a lot
so he
more.
won't really care, probably.
We're going to check where Matt Hancock spends that money, because he has to declare every
He has
penny in the
to,
Commons
yeah.
Register of Interest.
Yeah.
That would be the 400,000. So hopefully half goes to his former wife and children. One would
Andrew,
hope.
do you know what? There's nothing illegal about ending a marriage.
No, but he can give
It
half
was
to
a
her.
bit dodgy doing
surely.
it and breaking his own lockdown
It was
rules.
a bit, yes, with his mistress, with his hands on her bottom.
I don't even want...
The
I'm trying to wipe that from my memory.
video is the great video nasty of modern times. It
yeah.
was pretty awful.
No, I think, to be honest, most people will be, I imagine, more upset, particularly when it comes to care homes, and anybody who's lost a loved one.
He
and
was
should be
Secretary of State
donating
for
some
Health
to COVID
when
support
people with
charities.
COVID were discharged from hospitals into care homes with devastating consequences. That's on his record as Health Secretary.
And as Freddie Gray pointed out in the paper review, constituents will be watching him with great interest in West Suffolk, and whether or not some of that parliamentary money might go back to them. Look, with the time at 8:17, let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines this hour. President Joe Biden says it was a good day for democracy and America after voters cast their final ballots in the US midterm elections yesterday. The White House shared video of the president last night congratulating many Democrats who won hard-fought races. Control of the Senate, though, still hangs in the balance, but Republicans look set to take the House of Representatives.
And former Health Secretary, we were just talking about him, Matt Hancock, has joined now that cast of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. He's already taken part in his first bush trucker trial. He's faced a lot of criticism over his decision to join the reality show. He was seen entering the jungle in last night's episode with fellow campmates reacting with, I would say, some shock and laughter.
The Northern Ireland Secretary has denied resigning from the government, blaming a fake email sent to press outlets. Posting on Twitter, Chris Heaton-Harris described the claims as totally untrue and complete and utter tosh.
Well, very pleased about that. After the break, we're going to be speaking to women's rugby legend Rocky Clark. That's as England prepares for the Women's Rugby World Cup final on Saturday.
How did we not know about this?
I don't.
This is a huge deal. The women's
I must say,
rugby team.
I'm not glued to the sport bulletins.
No, I'm not either, but World Cup's a big deal,
It
and
is.
they're in the final against the All Blacks, and it's all happening on Saturday. We're getting all the build-up right here in just a moment.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
It's 8:22. I've spent about 3 hours chatting and hanging out with you, Andrew, and you've only now just dropped me that last night you had dinner with who?
Michael Caine and the lovely Shakira, who's fabulous.
And?
John Standing, the actor, you know John
Of
Standing,
course.
and his lovely wife,
Yeah.
Sarah, and Dame Joan Collins and Percy.
Just a understated Wednesday night.
I have in my study at home a life-size cutout of the two great women in my life.
Right.
Margaret Thatcher.
I thought you were
no
gonna say your
longer with
mother.
us. No, my mother's not with us now. And Dame Joan Collins, and they're next to each other.
Aw, how fabulous.
It's fabulous.
Gosh, what a casual Wednesday
Yeah,
night that
yeah.
was, out on the King's Road.
Yeah, I was very, very good. I didn't drink much and I was in bed early.
Well done.
Yeah.
I can't believe you only just dropped that in, 20
Sorry.
past 8, and you hadn't
Bit of
mentioned
name-
that.
bit of
Sorry, I
name- bit of name
just dropped it on the floor
Yeah.
there, and I'm just,
And
I'm impressed.
I'm seeing Joan tomorrow on Friday, Joan in person on Friday, because she does a big black tie dinner for her children's charity to raise money for
Andrew,
a
get her
terminally
on
ill
your
children's
show.
charity.
Get her on your
I think I might.
Maybe you could. Look, there's
I
lots
might.
more still to come on our programme, though, this morning. It is Guinness World Records Day, where hopefuls attempt to break records and have their achievements recorded, as we know, in the iconic book. But we're going to be speaking to the most flexible girl in the world. She's only 14 years old.
Right.
Her attempt, now let me check, is trying to do 11 back-to-chin rolls in 30 seconds.
How many
and
of
it's
those can you
incredible. I can't do any. It's extraordinary. This is it. Most chest to floor back bends in 30 seconds.
Is she going to do them for us?
I hope so.
Oh,
yeah.
terrific. Well, good
That's
luck
at
with that.
8:45.
Right, and at 9:15, we're going to be asking the Cabinet Minister, Chris Heaton-Harris, who hasn't left the government.
Yes, let's check that email was correctly
Yes.
sent to us.
Yeah. What the government's going to do about the nurses' strike. and the approaching crisis in the winter in the NHS.
And as always, we want to hear all your views this morning on all of the topics that we're discussing. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, here in London, underground staff in the RMT and Unite unions have gone on a 24-hour strike, disrupting travel for millions of commuters in the capital.
Drives me nuts, this does. Passengers are being warned to avoid the tube and check before they travel due to the latest strike. It's in a long-running dispute over jobs and pensions.
Well, let's speak to our London reporter, Alice Porter, who joins us this morning. Where are you, Alice, and what is going to be the impact, I suppose, really, on our roads? Or will, frankly, a lot of people just decide to work from home today if they can?
Yes, that's right, Isabel. I think a lot of people have chosen to work from home. They knew these strikes were going to be taking place and they've changed their plans accordingly. But of course, a lot of people have to get to work. They have to be there in person. And these strikes that are taking place today are going to cause absolute chaos around the capital. We've got almost the entire network is suspended for today, which is going to have an impact tomorrow. London Overground and the Elizabeth line are still operating, although that is still a reduced service at certain times. But the real impact we're going to see is on the roads, particularly those who are fortunate enough to drive around the capital or those who are going to get on the bus. Now, I'm just by King's Cross Station, of course, one of the busiest stations in London. I'm just going to show you here some of the people who are queuing for the buses. We've got two bus stops here, and people here, a lot of them have been waiting for a considerable amount of time, a number of them saying to me that they're going to be incredibly late for work. And I think with all these things, there's always just an element of confusion. I've been here for over an hour and people are on their phones desperately trying to work out how they're going to get to work because their normal route is so disrupted. I was speaking with some commuters just a short while ago about their journeys and the strikes, and this is what they had to say.
I work with children, and it's imperative and important that I get there, and especially for young children, I get there on time for familiarity and the daily routine. So yes, it's not convenient at all.
It's already been an hour and I have no idea when the next bus is coming either, and they've all been absolutely packed as well, so it's taken half an hour to even find a bus.
Yeah, I think given the news recently about the nurses, teachers, university lecturers, strikes are very much in the air at the moment, aren't they? And I think that's understandable considering the cost of living pressures that you mentioned, but also just a sense that the progress is being made in the support coming out from central government. The economy just seems to be going from crisis to crisis, so I don't think people are seeing a light at the end of the tunnel.
Those were some of the commuters speaking to me today. Now, for those of you who don't know, this is in fact the sixth strike which has taken place by staff on the London Underground. Why? Well, it's about a long-running dispute really about pensions. Ultimately, TfL have had a huge shortfall in funding because of the pandemic, really. Of course, that's the normal way they get their revenues, people getting on the tube. But that obviously wasn't able to happen during the pandemic. So the government bailed out TfL multiple times, billions and billions of pounds. But as part of that, the government sort of turned around to TfL and said, really, you've got to get your own house in order. And one of the aspects that they are wanting to sort of target is the very generous pension scheme which TfL staff have. So for whatever you put in, they put in 6 times that. So it's a very generous final salary, far more generous than, say, the Met Police or the London Fire Service. And then the Mayor for London, Sadiq Khan, he commissioned an independent report into the pensions about 2 years ago. And this independent report said it was outdated, that it was expensive, and that it was in need of modernisation. But of course, TfL staff are very keen to keep this generous salary, and they're concerned about any cuts to that, particularly in a cost of living crisis. It's in a very expensive city. People who are working here, commuting here, and have planned to have this salary, this final salary, will be keen to maintain it. And there's also concerns about the potential of 600 jobs being cut as well. Now, TfL say that's not going to end up with people having job cuts, but staff do say it will mean that station staff will be more stretched. They may have to go to different branches further away from their home, and they may have more unsociable working hours. So that's the conundrum, and I think the real concern is this has been going on for a number of months, almost years now, and it feels like there's no resolution yet. This is the 6th strike this year, and it's impacting, of course, so many commuters around the capital.
Yes, can I ask, are any tube lines operating at all, or is it pretty much virtually the whole thing is shut down?
Pretty much the whole thing is shut down. So the main, if you're trying to get on the London Underground today, I wouldn't recommend it at all. As I say, the London Overground and the Elizabeth line are still operating almost entirely, so that's good news. The DLR is as well, and trams, although those are severely reduced. The buses are still operating, but of course, as we were just showing there, they are incredibly busy. So I think a lot of people are choosing to work from home, which would be a good decision. But of course, some people, that's not an option for them, sadly.
Well, you know, it's going to be chaos, isn't it? And there'll be chaos tomorrow because it takes so long to get the rotas back to normal.
Yeah. Alice, thank you very much for that update. And I've got one of those days where I'm hopping across London in lots of different places. It's going to be a complete pain. I'm going to have to get my trainers on, I think.
Or get on a Boris bike.
I could get on a Boris bike in my work dress.
Yes,
that'll be comedy.
Why not? I see members of the House of Lords in their long frocks going to...
OK, no excuse.
Yeah.
OK, fair enough. Look, it's going to be the winter of discontent, isn't it? We've been talking this morning about the RMT and Unite union strikes. We've also got now the Royal College of Nursing saying that they've got a huge mandate for strikes, and lots of you getting in touch with your thoughts about this. Mike has said, thank you for getting in touch. He says, I don't agree with this. My daughter and my wife are both nurses. They're not in the profession for the money. It is a vocation. Archie, with the sentiment that the strike is wrong, and he says, although I'm not against nurses receiving a pay rise, I believe 17% is not realistic. And I wonder if that's where they've gone wrong in all of this, because the public will be supportive of what they do and a fair wage.
They do a tremendous job.
17% is RPI, which is 12% inflation, plus 5%. No one else is asking for that.
No, it's crazy. And the barristers were after something like 25%. They didn't get anything like it. I think the union, here is not doing their members any favours.
Well, let us know your thoughts this morning. Actually, Justin, I think healthcare assistants are equally deserving of a pay rise. They are, in my opinion, the backbone of the NHS. Keep those thoughts coming in. Now, after the break, we'll go through the papers. We've got Freddie Gray and Emma Burnell for one last look at what's on the headlines this Thursday morning.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak.
Stop talking. My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Well, it's time to go through the papers now. Joining us this morning again is the Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, and political consultant Emma Bennell. Good morning again to you both. Emma, you're going first. Gavin Williamson, who is ghastly, in my view. He's out of the Cabinet, thank the Lord. He lasted 2 weeks, a little longer than the former Prime Minister, Liz Truss. But he's back in the papers again. Yeah. What's going on?
So there's another story about Gavin Williamson leaking. We don't know what exactly it was, but apparently he has been leaked a story. The Guardian has 3 sources that say he's leaked a story of such high concern that there were... It's been quashed in the media, and the media have had an order put on them not to report the story.
Right, so this isn't in relation to his previous leak when he
this is a
released
whole new
information
leak
about Huawei's involvement in the 5G network, which got him into lots of hot water. It's totally new.
So it's a new leak, he's gone. Probably won't come back, although he's Gavin Williamson, so maybe he will. Who knows? He seems to bounce back more than a rubber ball. But... there is a real worry. A lot of this stuff was known. And OK, maybe it wasn't known by the general public, maybe it wasn't in the media, but people in Westminster knew it, and they still put him in government. And that is a real concern about not just Rishi Sunak's judgment in doing that, but where's the talent bench if that's who you're putting in? That's what I think would be worrying me, were I on the other side of the aisle.
Freddie?
There's a lot of leaking about leaking at the moment, isn't there?
Yeah.
I think it's a sign of a government that is pretty clapped out, that they are just sticking the knife in each other wherever they can. And, I mean, Gavin Williamson, I hear what you're saying, Andrew, but I think that, it's obviously a hit job. There's a hit job on him. A lot of sort of Rishi people are briefing against him now. They tried to get Suella out the week before. She just about held on there, and then with this one, he's had to cave. So I think it's, who's going to be next, I wonder. There's bound to be another person who will be deemed unacceptable. And Gavin Williamson was a ridiculous figure. I mean, he was a prat. He is a prat. But he's also, for journalists, he's great comedy value.
Yeah.
And I just...
As a lefty, brilliant, yeah.
Well, so Keir Starmer actually tapping into that and making the Prime Minister look a bit of a shambles.
Rishi wasn't so good yesterday, was he?
No.
Not so slick. Losing his slickness.
His strength and skill, Williamson, it was described to me by a cabinet minister. He said, useless at running a department, which was rather worrying when he was given defence and education before.
Not that they matter.
Hopeless on the media, so don't let him near a TV or radio bulletin. But what he's good is behind the scenes at the dark arts, the black art of political persuasion. He should have. But what his job was, he was Cabinet Office Minister without portfolio. He was going to operate as an unofficial second chief whip.
He was just a bully within the cabinet.
Yeah.
That was his purpose.
He's the Shakespeare of gossip.
Yes, he is.
He's brilliant at it, and that is why I'd be a little worried if I was certain members of the cabinet that now he has quite a lot of receipts and he's going to have vendetta.
Yeah.
And he's on the backbenches and can cause a lot of trouble.
Yeah. Well, yes, he's outside the tent, and I won't finish the phrase, but...
Yes, right.
Freddie, can we talk about the King being egged yesterday?
Yes.
This Extinction Rebellion anti-monarchy protester missed, but still managed to cause embarrassment. And it's been a long time since we've seen the royal family targeted in this way.
Yes, King saved by egg throwers' rotten aim is a rather good headline.
Very good.
In the Times. Emma would say it's rather unfair that King Charles has been targeted by Extinction Rebellion, given he's done so much green.
Yes.
Yeah, of all the things.
Life.
I mean, I'm no monarchist, as your viewers who've seen me before will know. I don't think you should throw eggs at anyone, king or pauper. But it does seem untargeted both in aim and in target, because he has, for all his other faults and for the faults of the system that we may disagree over, he has really, really been vocal about the environment for longer than it was trendy.
Well, this chap was overheard shouting and muttering about slavery, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't appear to be sort of linked to Extinction Rebellion. He's an Extinction Rebellion activist, so he probably just wanted to throw something
And we
at
actually
the King.
wasn't it Extinction Rebellion who put a sponge pie in the Madame Tussauds waxwork of Prince Charles? Or the King.
Yes.
Again, not seeming to get their history. As Emma points out, he's been campaigning on the environment since he was 17. He's now 73.
It would have been...
He's been campaigning on this. He's been long before these people were born.
I mean, there would have been a lot of upgrade. It would have been quite fun if you'd hit him and King Charles had done a John Prescott, do you remember?
Yeah.
The rumble in Rye.
Yeah.
I also would like to point out that they're clearly not a vegan if they're throwing eggs.
Right.
Good point. Very good point.
Yeah. And what a waste.
What a waste, because actually there's a shortage of eggs
bank.
because of this avian flu at the moment.
Exactly.
That we've been warned that there might be a shortage of eggs.
A really stupid protester,
Right across the
actually.
board. I think we can all agree on that.
I mean, does anyone ever throw anything at the Queen?
I don't think they did.
So. I think she always managed to...
But she would have been unruffled if they had.
Yeah.
If you remember when she was doing Trooping the Colour once, she was on her horse and somebody let off her ceremonial blanks. And the horse was startled, the Queen wasn't. Of course, the show went on. Extraordinary.
Yes. Can we talk, Emma, about Jennifer Aniston? This isn't just a showbiz story. I think it's a really important issue because it talks about the pressure on childless women to explain themselves. And there is sort of a societal expectation that women all want to be mothers. And Jennifer Aniston, for years, was accused of having denied Brad Pitt a child. And for the first time ever, this huge American star, the star of Friends, has come out and said, actually, privately, I've had a huge IVF struggle and I haven't wanted to talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, as someone who is childless by choice, I really respect the way that she's managed this process, that she's waited until after all that pressure was on, you know, the years and years of her 30s and 40s, where every newspaper in the world was on and on and on and on at her about whether she was going to have kids or not. And she never caved while that was still something that was, you know, potentially on the cards. Now she's 53, she said, it's all behind me. I'm fine. You know, there is more to life than having kids.
Yeah.
And good for her. I really respect the way that she's dealt with it, both in terms of keeping her private life to a certain extent private, but also not making it this big, it's a, you know, all women should be able to, and it's such a tragedy not to. You know, some of us choose not to have kids and that's okay too.
Yeah, absolutely.
She is fabulous, isn't she?
Blooming
it's
amazing.
wonderful.
Oh, God.
Yeah, still at 53. I mean, we haven't shown the pictures. I don't think we showed the picture of her in the Chanel bikini, which was not really a bikini. It was just it just covered her nipples, if I'm allowed to say that. And at 53, I thought, fair enough, you've got washboard abs.
If I look like that, which I never will.
And I've got to say, she's aged better than Brad Pitt, and he hasn't done badly.
Well, that's real the booze. But, you know, anyway.
Yeah.
Look, we are going to keep this really brief. I'm so sorry, because we've got an extremely bendy girl coming up and hopefully a World Cup winner in the rugby. Oh, no, I've been told we've got 3 more minutes.
I could say to that.
I was trying to wrap there.
We do want to talk about benders.
Professional benders, no less.
Of course. Nobody better.
You're making me giggle. Freddie, let's get serious again then.
Serious.
Oh, can we talk about this? Because obviously Elon Musk has taken over Twitter.
I'm enjoying the...
Have you got a blue tick?
Musk. I do.
Yeah.
I wake up every morning and think, God, I'm important. I have a blue tick.
Well, but are you official?
Because now you need double verification.
But it's being pulled.
Oh, is
being
it?
pulled, they're going to pull it.
Oh,
yes.
good, because I wasn't official, but I was verified.
It was
and I
all
was
a
beginning to feel
publicity
insecure.
stunt.
It was all the publicity stuff, and I think he's a comic genius. He tweeted after they pulled it, big embarrassing thing for him. Please note that Twitter will do lots of dumb things in the coming months.
Oh, great.
We will keep what works and change what doesn't. I think it's glorious. I think he's an agent of chaos.
If my business tweeted out, we're going to do some really stupid stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I obviously tweet stupid things all the time, but that's because I have a really, really bizarre sense of humour. But if I did that from my business and said political human is going to do terribly stupid things from now on, I wouldn't get any business.
Yeah, but he doesn't mind if he doesn't get any business because he's a billionaire. How much is he worth? How many billion is he worth?
Less than he used to be.
Right. Well, he's paid a lot of money for Twitter.
He's paid 40 or something.
I know. I don't have a blue arrow on my Twitter account, and
serious?
I don't care.
Well,
it hasn't helped me up in getting Twitter
I
followers.
got one.
No. Well, I mean, what I love about Musk is people on Twitter take themselves way too seriously.
Yeah.
And he is taking the mickey out of all of them.
Yes.
I got a blue check because somebody else with my name got there first. So she was getting all my abuse when I came on telly.
Nobody wants to impersonate me or pretend they're me because that would just be too awful for them.
The verification process is ridiculous, though, because my actual name is not my work, well, my married name. I've taken my married name outside of work, but you have to give your passport details to get a blue tick, and they couldn't comprehend that perhaps I had a different professional name to what was on my passport.
It's in the modern world they're in, then, are they, these people?
No, it's archaic.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't like Elon Musk meddling with Twitter. I like it as it is.
You like it as it is. I mean, some people say the reason Twitter works so well is because it's so disgusting. And that, you know, people do think of themselves as very important because they've got a blue tick, and it's a bit like life, where you have to deal with awful, self-important people all the time.
Should I feel diminished by the fact that I don't have a blue tick?
Yes, associate editor.
You say it works well. It doesn't make any money. This is the weird thing about all this. Twitter has never, as far as I'm aware, made any money for anyone except now Jack Dorsey, who just built Elon Musk for a billion.
But the day it starts making money is the day I know I'll start hating it, because you'll be tweeting and it'll be popping up with adverts and closing the whole time. Keep it
really
as a loss-making enterprise, please, Elon. That would be
or
fabulous.
if he turns it into the everything app, and then you do your payments through it, you do everything, you do book your cars, get your deliveries through it, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, there we are.
Right, Freddie Gray, Emma Burnell, we are now going to wrap. I'm sorry to try and
move on to the bending.
Well, I've been told the bending woman might not be bending for us.
I thought we
can't
had
get the
an item
connection.
on bending.
Well, we'll see.
So inflexible.
We'll try.
We could try and demonstrate it ourselves. Isabel, what do you think?
I'll let you do it, the professional bending.
Right, okay.
Freddie Gray, Emma Burnell, thank you both very much.
Great to see you. Well, let's bring you up to date. America's top general is estimating Russia's military has seen more than 100,000 of its soldiers killed or wounded in Ukraine. The chairman of the US Joint Chief of Staff, General Mark Milley, also says the war has probably killed 40,000 civilians.
President Joe Biden says it was a good day for democracy and America after voters cast their final ballots in the US midterm elections yesterday. The White House shared videos of the president last night congratulating many Democrats who won hard-fought races. Control of the Senate is still hanging in the balance, but Republicans look set to take the House of Representatives.
And former Health Secretary Matt Hancock, he's in the jungle. I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. He's taken part in his first bush trucker trial. He's faced a lot of hassle and criticism, of course, over his decision to join the show. Seen entering the jungle in last night's episode with fellow campmates, some reacting with shock, others, frankly, laughing at him.
Right, it is the big match on Saturday. England face off against New Zealand in the Women's Rugby World Cup final at Eden Park in Auckland.
And joining us today is 2014 Rugby World Cup champion Rocky Clark, and back with us in the studio, of course, is sports broadcaster Paul Coit.
Good morning to you, Rocky, then. Look, this is a bit of a nail-biting finale because, of course, the All Blacks right across the genders are always strong contenders.
Oh yeah, they are for sure, and we've come up against them many times in the final, and unfortunately we've come off second best. But I think we're in the best possible position we can be to win the World Cup against the Kiwis.
Rocky,
you know, you say you're in the best possible shape, but it's 30, isn't it like 30 on the bounce now that England have managed to win? I mean, there's not been any dominance like this in any sport, has there? I mean, this is incredible, which then makes me worry, thinking, oh, does that mean that it's going to happen once and it's going to happen in the final? So to put our mind at rest, everything's going to be fine, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's a lot of pressure resting on their shoulders and they're expected to win and they only know how to win. So they're going to have a lot of pressure. Obviously, New Zealand are playing in front of a home crowd. They've been playing really well throughout the World Cup. But we also know that we can beat New Zealand, as we beat them last year twice in a row. And New Zealand were also beat by France as well last season. So they're going to come at us. They're two completely different playing styles. We're going to be more structured, rely on our set piece with a phenomenal defence. New Zealand, as we know, like to chuck the ball around, offloading quick-paced game. So as long as we stop it getting to their wings, Portia Woodman, Ruby Tui, then we should be fine.
Rocky, do you get frustrated? Not only do the women's team get overshadowed by the men's, but also when it comes to the sport. I mean, I think of the Lionesses and the support, the national support and the publicity that they got when they reached this stage in the Football World Cup compared to, I mean, forgive me, I didn't even know we were getting to the final this weekend. I'm absolutely thrilled, but a bit ashamed of myself I didn't know. But there's a sort of secondary level to all of this, which is unfortunate, don't you think?
I think we're going in the right direction for sure. And I was one of the maximum crowd out at Wembley to watch the Euros. It was absolutely amazing, and women's sport in general is going through the roof. And we just need to get behind each other. And unfortunately, obviously, because it's being played in New Zealand, all the games are at sort of 3 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, that kind of thing. So it hasn't got the biggest coverage that it might have if it was slightly better times. However, the women's sport is starting to break records. Every time we have a match in England, we're sell-out crowds. So I think we're going in the same direction as the Euros. So I'm pretty happy the way it's going. And certainly if we win the World Cup, I think that's going to change the sport forever.
In the 137 games you played, the difference in the first game you played for England up to the 137th and now to how things are now?
Yeah, when I first started, it was out in Canada, and I was quite a bit heavy, I must say. It was, you only had a handful of people watching, and the resources you had, and obviously we weren't full time. The girls now are in amazing condition. The resources we have, the social media, the coverage. You know, you can access any of the players. You know who the Hannah Bottomans are, the Holly Aitchisons, the Zoe Harrisons, and to have them, the guys, be just so, so out there, and every position. I think I've probably got more fame now after playing rugby than when I did. So that just shows you how the game has evolved and the speed of the game, the physicality. It's a different level now to when I got my cap 20 years ago.
Time to go back. I think she ought to go back to playing again then, make the most of it.
Well, look, Rocky, we're so excited about the final. Give us a prediction. Who's going to win and what's the score?
OK, I think England are going to win by 9 points.
Ooh, so, I like it. I like your style. Fabulous. Rocky Clark, former England captain and indeed World Cup winner, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, having said that we weren't going to be able to get to the World Guinness Records Day, we can indeed. We're trying to keep this running order
very exciting.
Nice and flexible. It was, of course, first held in 2004, and the event is now a hotly anticipated annual celebration of dedication, persistence and elite-level talent.
Now, joining us this morning is 14-year-old contortionist Liberty Barros, who recently broke the record for, get this, for most chest to back bends in 30 seconds. It's a move she calls the Liberty Lowdown, and she joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Are you going to be able to demonstrate this for us at all on the television?
Yes, I'm really excited to as well. I love this move.
Tell us, OK, well, we'll look forward to that in a second, but tell us how on earth you discovered you could do this, because this is quite a funny story. It was all by accident, wasn't it?
Yeah, because it's really, really funny because when I was younger, I wasn't even flexible in the slightest. Like, I would try and do cartwheels and handstands and back bends and stuff, but I would face plant every single time.
Aww.
Like, my face and the floor had a personal connection. They had each other's numbers. So I wasn't flexible at all, and I was really ill as well. So this stopped me from doing a lot of things. And it wasn't until later that I was watching a Rihanna music video and I copied a dance move and I went all the way backwards and got my head to my bottom, and then my breathing difficulty went away. It was really, really cool. And that's how I discovered my big flexibility moves, and now I've added in like dancing and waves to my dance to make it better, the flexibility.
Wow.
And how did you get into the position now where you're potentially breaking world records? I mean, are you competing with other people, or are you the only one who does this move?
Well, this is basically my move, the Liberty Lowdown.
Yeah.
It has my name in it. It's basically like kind of like a squat thing, and I just love to do the move. And I noticed it's known as the hardest backbend move in the world.
Right.
And on Guinness, I didn't see any really, really flexible records. So I was like, this would be really cool to have on the website. So I did the record to get it up there, and I hope people will attempt to do it. That's my goal, to get people to be inspired to do the record.
OK, well, listen, I know that you've got to try and get that record a little bit later on today. The aim is to get the most chest-to-floor backbends in 30 seconds. And it just so happens we've got about 30 seconds till we go on there. So would you like to have a little warm-up session, see if you can do it now for us?
Yes, of course.
Here we go.
This off.
Get the stopwatch on.
Yeah. I'm in awe.
Me too. OK, she has to de-rig. I understand now why this is a bit of a tricky manoeuvre. Well done.
I'll give you a little demonstration.
Good luck.
Wow.
Ah!
One.
Ah!
Good grief. Wow. Two. Oh, wow. Well done. Bravo.
What a champion.
Oh, look at her.
What a champion.
Oh, she's going in.
Look at that.
Fantastic. Oh, my goodness. And look around to the side. What a superstar. If you're listening on the radio, you can, of course, see this all on the app. And let me tell you, it is worth tuning in and having a look, because she is
I've got to say, Liberty, we
she
are in
can't hear
awe.
us, but she's just 14 years old. And wow, what a future she's got with moves like that.
She's going to be in the Olympic Games. She's going to win. But
she's going to get that world record for sure.
I hope she does.
Thank you, Liberty Barros. Good luck today. And look, if you're watching and listening at home, do stay with us. Lots more coming up, including we're going to be speaking to both Labour and Conservative about the impending nurses' strike. See you in a sec. Wow, that was
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Are authorities, are communities doing all they can to combat violent crime? With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio
and online. We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
The Nurses Union announced its first ever UK-wide strike.
Good morning. It is 9 o'clock. It's Thursday, the 10th of November. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel and Andrew.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The Royal College of Nursing has announced its members have backed strikes in a dispute over pay, with action expected before the end of the year. It's the first UK-wide strike in the union's 106-year history.
The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has demanded that police take a firmer line with eco-protesters like Just Stop Oil. It comes after a day of transport disruption, with climate protesters blocking parts of the M25.
And that man, Matt Hancock, well, he's there. He's made his celebrity debut in the jungle. He's faced both a bush trucker trial and interrogation from his campmates. TV presenter Charlene White wanted to know why the former Health Secretary was taking part in the show while Parliament was still in session.
And we love to hear from you throughout the programme. Lots of views coming in to us on Twitter and on email. Keep them coming in and we'll read out just as many as we can. So our top story this hour, and nurses have voted to strike in a dispute over pay, with action expected to start before the end of the year.
It's the first UK-wide action ever carried out by the Royal College of Nursing, which represents around 500,000 nurses.
Well, it comes as the NHS faces what could be its worst ever winter crisis due to staff shortages, a COVID backlog and a potential twindemic of COVID and flu. Well, joining us for more on all of this is political correspondent Tom Harwood, who joins us in the studio. And this is a really difficult path to tread for the government, because everybody wants a nurse to be there and to care for them in those important moments in their life, whether it's when they come into the world or they leave it.
Certainly, and this is a pretty tricky situation because we know the pressures that nurses are under, we know the pressures that the NHS as a whole is under, but also we know that the demands that the unions of the nurses are making are extraordinarily expensive. £9 billion, that's the kind of money that the government just doesn't have. Of course, a week today we're expecting this autumn statement that is supposed to plug a big black hole in finances. Now, demands for extra money on top of that black hole would make that even harder to deliver. So clearly there is a bit of an issue here because the nurses are demanding one thing and the government simply do not believe that it's achievable. Clearly, there is going to have to be some sort of accommodation between the two sides. Nurses will be offered some sort of pay settlement, but it won't be the £9 billion, the 17% increase that is being demanded. And it's just so very, very sad for everyone in the country, really, that it's come to a strike before that kind of negotiation could be concluded.
I wonder, actually, if the RCN, the Royal College of Nursing, Tom, has scored an own goal in pitching it so high, 17%, because even people who love nurses, we all want nurses to do well, will realise completely unrealistic.
Unrealistic, especially when you compare what nurses earn in the real world to other professions of a similar level. Nurses out in the country, if you include things like the generous pension settlements that nurses are on, it's around a £50,000 average wage. In London, that's around a £60,000 a year average wage. It's a large amount of money when you include all of those extra benefits and the sick leave and everything else. So asking for a 17% increase on top of that, when most people in the private sector aren't getting anywhere close to those sort of increases, it's a very difficult line to walk.
Well, there will be real pressure to get a resolution in this, won't there, before any walkouts happen, just with patient safety front and centre, I suppose, in all of that. Tom, we have to go because we have a Shadow Minister standing by, so we're going to go and speak now to Peter Kyle. He's Shadow Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. A very good morning to you, Mr Kyle. First of all, let's talk about, I suppose, your portfolio and the announcement yesterday that the extended deadline in Northern Ireland has been reached. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, it's inevitable because there's been no settlement. Nobody in Northern Ireland wants an election. It's a bit unfortunate because the Secretary of State just 10 days ago announced that we would have elections, and suddenly there's been an about-face. And as you know, instability and indecision and chaos in Northern Ireland is the absolute worst thing you want, because a political vacuum is always filled by things that take us backwards, not forwards. So, but the real question is, what are we going to do in the next period? What is government going to do now it's bought more time in the next period that they didn't do in the last period? We need to make sure that extra time is used wisely. Now, the government is trying to separate the issues of the protocol negotiations with the EU with Northern Ireland politics. I say that they are indivisible. They need to be accepted as such. So Chris Eaton-Harris, the Secretary of State, if it was me, Secretary of State, I would glue myself to the Foreign Secretary. I would be the voice of Northern Ireland in those negotiations. I would be constantly feeding back to all political parties and party leaders in Northern Ireland the state of affairs, and then make sure that all party leaders are being spoken to together. It's been years since all of the political parties were brought together around the table with either the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland or the Prime Minister. It's been years since the Prime Minister himself or herself convened multi-party talks in Northern Ireland. There's got to be a change of attitude. There's got to be more emphasis on Northern Ireland, and the interests of Northern Ireland have got to be put first, not as it has been for years now, neglected and used as a tool to beat a political tool to beat the EU with or other issues.
Can I ask you about the nurses' strike, Peter Kyle? You're obviously nobody wants to see the nurses go on strike. They're seeking a 17% pay rise. Would a Labour government pay that?
That would be for negotiation, and we would negotiate in good faith. And I'll tell you what also, though, Andrew, we wouldn't wait till they've balloted for action before we'd start engaging with them. The Royal College had started to send out the signals that they were moving in this direction way back, actually the beginning of summer and earlier. That is the point at which this crisis could have been headed off. It is right that the government facilitates these kind of conversations and makes sure that we do so in a timely manner. You can see in other areas of public services, there are some areas which have been settled now by functional relationships and dialogue with unions. It's just a shame that this government seems to exacerbate the problem. They seem to think that this is an issue that they can actually win in political terms, whilst workers themselves are being put through hell.
Well, in fairness, the Health Secretary has said that they entirely accept the recommendations of the independent pay review body when it comes to this. They also gave nurses a 3% pay rise last year, opposed to any other public sector workers. I just wonder whether you think that asking for inflation RPI plus 5%, 17% at this time when we know there's this huge black hole to fill is actually defeating their own argument.
Well, these are issues that need to be dealt with around the negotiating table. The fact that government isn't around that table just shows that these problems can't be solved. They need to get around the table. Now, of course, you know, there needs to be concessions. Workers have the right to strike, but isn't it interesting that nurses have never used it before? In 106 years, this is the first time. Now, that sends alarm bells to us. It shows that this is something extremely unusual. This is actually an extreme measure that they're taking. They have the right to strike. They have now balloted for action, but they've not yet set a date for it. So there is now a window of opportunity. I expect the government to get round the table. Now, workers have been put through an extraordinarily difficult, nurses have been put through an extraordinarily difficult period. What they did through COVID was unbelievable. There has been a worker shortage. 10% of vacancies in nursing and in the NHS are vacant right now. 10%. The extra strain on those workers in the NHS is absolutely through the roof at the moment. I've been into hospitals, I've seen it myself, people being treated on stretchers. Think of the people who are having to treat those people on stretchers. They themselves are having a really hard time of it. So we need to fix the workers, the challenge that we have with the NHS workforce. The Labour Party will we will double the number of training places for doctors and district nurses. We'll create an extra 10,000 nurses and midwives. We'll pay for that by cancelling the non-dom status, the tax break for wealthy people who are avoiding paying taxes in this country, so it's fully funded. We need to get the fundamentals of these sorts of challenges right, and we also need to get the fundamentals of running the economy right. The reason why nurses are stretched so much, like all other workers, is because the government blew a hole in our finances, so people are paying another £500 or £695 for their mortgages, and they're paying so much more for their energy bills unnecessarily. So all of these challenges are in the mix.
Peter, if I can ask you just finally, your colleague, the Labour Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has urged the RMT to call off this ridiculous strike on the Tube, the 6th one this year. Is he right? Should the Tube strike be cancelled?
I think Sadiq Khan puts a lot of effort. He is somebody who gets around the table with them. So Sadiq is right to call off for people to call his strikes, because he is always willing to talk to the RMT. He is always there to engage. I hope these strikes can be avoided, but I know Sadiq will always be available to have conversations, and I hope the RMT take him up on that offer.
He's the Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much. Well, let's bring in now a friend of the show, Norman Baker, to take us through his top stories of the day. And first of all, I suppose a bit of reaction to his evaluation of the nurses' strike, the Tube strike today.
Well, the Tube strike's very unfortunate, of course, and it's unnecessary. And actually, the Mayor of London is a friend of the unions, as it happens.
Yes.
And he's been put in this position because there's been an unfortunate fallout, really, between the Mayor of London and the government, which has not helped matters. I have to say some of the demands the government's making of Sadiq Khan weren't dealt with when Boris Johnson was Mayor of London. They were left till Sadiq Khan became Mayor, and they're now demanding matters to be addressed which weren't addressed then. So this is a political mess, to be honest with you, in the RMT strike. The nurses, I think the main issue there with the nurses is they were being clapped on the doorsteps, weren't they, not very long ago? People were saying how wonderful they were.
They got a COVID bonus from the government.
They did get a COVID bonus.
They got a 3% increase last year.
But actually, I don't think, although money is an issue, I think the root of it is that there's a 10%, Peter Carl's point actually, there's a shortage of nurses and they're under tremendous pressure. I think that's what's driving their actions.
Yeah, this will make it work, but this is just going to make it worse.
Well, exactly.
Yeah, indeed. Anyway,
yes, so your top stories,
I want to go on to this dreadful news, and from my point of view, that two separate journalists, or one photographer and one journalist, were arrested by Hertfordshire police for doing their job, for just attending, as it happens, the demonstration Just Stop Oil, and reporting it, seeking to report it. I mean, what country are we living in? Is this a dictatorship? Why shouldn't journalists be allowed to report these matters freely?
What basis were they arrested? Because I know one of the reporters spent 5 hours in a police cell.
Not only spent 5 hours in a police cell, but when he got home, he found that the police had been round to his house, forced entry, effectively, when his wife and daughter were there, and searched the house.
That's terrible.
This is absolutely unacceptable.
So how are the police getting this so wrong, then? Because the public mood is very much that they need to be doing their job better, and certainly Suella Braverman accused them of institutional reluctance to be firm with the protesters, but it seems that they're turning on journalists.
Well, look, I mean, there's two different messages from government. I want to be, unusually here, complimentary to the Prime Minister.
Good Lord.
Because...
Can we frame this moment? Freeze frame it.
Capture it.
Yeah.
Because Rishi Sunak has rightly said that Hertfordshire police were wrong. He said that he believes freedom of the press is the cornerstone of democracy and that journalists should be able to do their jobs freely without restrictions. Yeah. Absolutely right. Now, for me, that's not a controversial statement.
No.
But it's contrary, really, to the Home Secretary, who's urging the police to clamp down on everybody and anybody in her statement to the police.
No, she wants them, Norma, to move on these wretched protesters who are causing huge disruption on roads and places around the country.
Disruption.
And they are breaking the law.
They are breaking the law, and they should be dealt with in the law. But I think some of her language, as always, is inflammatory. We talked about invasions last week. Her language is inflammatory and doesn't help the situation at all. Now, in this country, we have to be prepared to some extent, and I think this goes beyond it with the Just Stop Oil, but to some extent to tolerate protest. That's what happens in democracy. And we saw yesterday, for example, someone throwing eggs at King Charles. King Charles now.
Yes.
I have to get used to
I know, it's difficult. Well, it's been 73 years that he was a prince, so we'll forgive you.
Thank you. But he was throwing eggs at King Charles. Well, I mean, you shouldn't have thrown eggs at King Charles. It's just discourteous. But look, in this country, we throw eggs. We don't have bullets, do we?
Yeah. But also, he was an eco-protester as well, for heaven's sake.
Well, I hope free-range eggs, that's all I can say.
He's a great champion of the environment. What are they thinking of?
Well,
do their brains work properly?
People aren't always consistent in their actions. I think he said, "Not my king." I mean, the picture of him in the eye, or the protester, which you haven't got, I don't think, but he's flat on the ground with his legs being tied. Now, I don't know whether that's absolutely necessary or not.
Well, I suppose at that point you don't know how big a threat they are to the king, and it starts with eggs, and you have to take every precaution necessary. But when it comes back
and the king would take that sort of thing in his stride anyway.
Yeah,
I don't think he's asked for him to.
No, of course he hasn't.
And as I say, in this country we throw eggs. I remember when John Prescott was subject.
Well, he threw a punch in response.
Someone was throwing eggs and he threw a punch in reply.
Yeah,
that was the most interesting thing in the 2001 election.
It was great. It was a left hook. Of course it was a left hook.
Now, I noticed you've come dressed head to toe in red. I'm sure that's got absolutely nothing to do with the red tsunami that didn't materialise in the States. But I know you want to talk about the US elections.
Isabel, that's a lovely link, I must say.
See what I did
congratulations on your link there. No, I mean, the US elections are fascinating, and I think in this country we do pay attention to them, not simply because they're important for us, but because in themselves they're interesting how the American system works. And I think the great surprise for many people has been how the Republican tsunami that was expected has turned into a ripple. I think it's been described a sort of raspberry ripple in the.
What do you think is the story there, though? Do you think that this was anticipated by the press, or the Trump rhetoric got everybody whipped up, or do you think it's actually possibly about sort of anti-abortion horror from the left, that they don't want this sort of wave? I don't know.
I was very encouraged by the maturity, if you like, of the American electorate, which I was beginning to doubt. But the American electorate actually distinguished between Republicans who were, if you like, common sense Republicans, and Republicans who were election deniers and Trump supporters. And the ones who were Trump supporters, by and large, got hammered.
They did.
And the other ones did quite well. There's a lesson there, and we don't know who's won the election yet, but we know who's lost it, which is Donald Trump.
Yes, and of course he's meant to be having this huge announcement on Tuesday, all heavily timed, because he thought there was going to be the red surge. So does he now wimp out? But the other thing, I think, for the Democrats, they've done a lot better than they expected. Are they really going to plod on with that doddery old Joe Biden, who really is terrible?
I know.
Well, there's two...
Nice man, I'm sure, but
he is
just
a nice man, but
no good.
The two things are that, actually, from Trump's point of view, he's now blaming his wife, of all people, and his aides.
Who is?
Trump. He's saying that it wasn't his fault, it was the fault of his wife and his aides that the results were as they were. I mean, it's unbelievable. The narcissism of this man is just incredible. But actually, on your point about Biden, the Republicans have got a silver lining here, in my view, because it's more likely now that Biden will stand again and not be opposed. And that's probably not good news for Democrats, because Biden can beat Trump. I'm not sure he can beat anybody else.
No, and Ron DeSantis, who's seen as the dark horse or the potential favourite, did incredibly well in Florida.
Yeah.
He looks good, young, nice, young family.
Yeah.
He ticks all the right boxes, doesn't he? I mean, Biden is becoming more confused, it seems, by the week.
Well, he wasn't able to pronounce the Prime Minister's name, was he?
He wasn't. He also managed to confuse the Iraq War with the Ukraine War and tell us that his son died in the Iraq War when his son actually died of cancer 5 or 6 years ago.
I feel uncomfortable. What is the solution when you have a president who's turning senile? How do you handle that?
They won't want him to moved aside because they think the Vice President, Kamala Harris, is hopeless.
Yes.
So you were saying you think actually that Biden's wife is very much running the show behind closed doors.
The First Lady is running the show, I think. Yeah, and she looks good and she's solid.
But
and
she's
she
not
loves
been
her
elected.
husband. No, but she loves her husband. She wouldn't be the First Lady to run a government, but don't we always say that Cherie Blair was rather powerful? They'll be furious if they're watching the Blairs, but I've said it. Cherie Blair, hugely influential. That was the truth. That's what we used to say.
Well, there's no chance of that with Melania.
No.
I thought it was Alistair Campbell and Peter Mandelson who ran the government.
Yes, I think you're probably right. I think Cherie chipped in a bit.
You reckon? OK, listen, Norman, we have to leave it there. It's been a pleasure.
Okay,
Always
thank
lovely
you.
to see you. We haven't seen enough of you lately. We have to get you back in again soon. Now, with Remembrance Sunday fast approaching, and of course it's Armistice Day tomorrow, isn't it? The 94th Fields of Remembrance will open today at Westminster Abbey.
It will remain open until November the 20th, so members of the public can pay their respects to all of those who've given their service and indeed their lives to serve this country. Our reporter, Rosie Wright, she's there for us now.
A very good morning to both of you. Yes, the 94th Field of Remembrance. Welcome into the grounds of Westminster Abbey. And let's just have a very quick look. Over 70,000 crosses and other symbols have been planted by volunteers. Now, you, me, members of the public will be able to come and visit and pay our own respects and remember. But let's find out why this is so important. Joining me now is Jeff Short, who is the Director of Production and Estate at the Poppy Factory. What is the Field of Remembrance all about?
Well, good morning, Rosie, and everyone else. The Field of Remembrance has been in being here for 94 years. It is a way of remembering those who've given their lives in conflict and terrorist acts. And it started off in 1928 by the founder of the Poppy Factory, Mr. George Howson, who very cleverly decided that we needed to have some place to go and remember and to commemorate the people who'd gone before us. And he started off with a couple of minor crosses. You can see them here, the World War I cross and then the Second World War cross. That was just placed in the middle of the ground, and then people came along and planted poppies. That transformed over the years into crosses that people wrote their little inscription and salutation on, and now we have ended up in a situation with 308 plots from a variety of regimental associations, civilian groups. The Royal British Legion have the whole bank of plots along the edge there, and we've been doing it for, as I say, 94 years. This is the 100th year of the Poppy Factory, so we're really delighted to be doing it once more and keep that tradition going.
And a huge team of people have been working tirelessly to get things ready and underway for today.
Yes.
Just explain, for you personally, what does remembrance look like and what does it mean?
Well, for me personally, I did 37 years in the Navy as a nuclear engineer, and really, to me, it's just a way of saying thank you, because the freedoms we have at the moment are really important to us. And it's another way of getting people to come into a field like this and just pay their respects. And what I say to everybody, there's no seniority in remembrance. We have people standing in front of the plots from all ranks and rates. We have generals, we have sailors, we have corporals, and it just brings that community together again. So it's a lovely way of remembering us.
It's going to be open to the public. What are you looking for people to do when they come and visit?
We're looking for people to come along and respectfully remember. Look at the plots, have a good look around and see where their family, if any connections, and also to plant their own crosses. So everybody is welcome. We have a number of, you mentioned earlier on, we have Sikh tributes, Muslim tributes, Hindu tributes, we have humanist as well. And so it's for everybody, and that's what we're trying to achieve here.
Just finally, is there a challenge and how do you overcome it in making sure that with each year we go past the absolute atrocities of the First World War and the Second World War that people do still remember?
It is a challenge because the generations have passed. So it's things like this, and the Poppy factory itself down in Richmond. We've had a refurbishment. We've got a lovely new visitor centre, and that shows the last 100 years and tells the story of the Poppy factory and the things we produce and what we do for veterans around the country. And we also have a system of employment service that has 15 consultants dotted around the country whose job is to get veterans into work, mainly veterans with health challenges, a lot of them PTSD from Iraq and Afghanistan, get them real jobs and move them forward in their lives.
Jeff, thank you very much for speaking to me. So the grounds of Westminster Abbey will be open for you to come and visit. If you'd like to plant a symbol yourself too, it will be open from later on this afternoon.
Okay, Rosie, thank you very much indeed. Look, time to look at some of the views that have been coming in. A whole array of topics this morning. We talked a little bit earlier about the John Lewis ad. You weren't impressed with John Lewis?
I wasn't, actually. I expect it to be one of those great Christmas highlights where you go, I was rather...
Which it is. The advert's lovely and the musical soundtrack, but you felt it was a sort of political interview.
I thought the interview with the woman from John Lewis, it was very political. I expected that to be made by the charity.
Right. Well, Russell agrees. Whilst I 100% agree with the sentiment of the John Lewis advert, I think it was too political. Dawn disagreed. She said, very impressed with the John Lewis Christmas ad and the great cause they are backing. They do have a social conscience, I suppose.
They do.
And they're trying to do something about children going through the care system.
How
and the foster
fabulous.
system.
And that's all good.
But have they kind of missed that moment?
You want that Christmas moment, don't you?
Absolutely. Look, I'm told that we can now speak to Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. We're joined by Chris Heaton-Harris. We're absolutely thrilled that you are able to join us because we weren't sure whether this was a fake email or not, because I know that there's been a few doing the rounds in relation to you. That's all been cleared up. You want to talk about Northern Ireland
I've got to
today.
stop my mum from hacking into the system.
It's causing mayhem, that's for sure. Look, the Prime Minister heading over to Northern Ireland today, first Prime Minister to do so since, I believe, 2007. And yesterday, that decision to extend the election deadline being made as well, and to dock the pay, crucially, of Assembly members. Do you think that will be able to, with this summit and with that announcement, end the deadlock at Stormont?
Well, I mean, firstly, the Prime Minister's heading to Blackpool today for the British Irish Council, which is actually really genuinely important because he's the first Prime Minister to go to this sort of the British Irish Council for a decade, and I'm hoping that it will cement our relationship with Ireland as we move forward, because they're a really important partner of ours. And so it will be a very important meeting. He's also meeting the First Minister of Scotland and Mark Drakeford as well from Wales. And yesterday I announced that I was going to delay the elections to the Northern Ireland Assembly, a legal duty that fell upon me on the 1 minute past midnight on the 28th of October, till the new year, hopefully to give some time and space for two sets of conversations to happen. One, for me to have more conversations with the political leaders in Northern Ireland to try and get them back into the Assembly. But the stumbling point there is the Northern Ireland Protocol and the Democratic Unionists' concern about what it does to the flow of goods and other things and governance for Northern Ireland and the Union. And I'm hoping the second set of conversations between the UK government and the European Commission can now take place in the run-up to Christmas. And I'm a glass half full man. I'm really quite positive about all this.
Secretary of State, when your mate Boris Johnson said he'd got Brexit done, of course he hadn't, had he? Because Northern Ireland is effectively still in the European Union. It's still in the single market. If you talk to people in Northern Ireland, they feel deeply, deeply aggrieved by it. They're being treated differently to the rest of the United Kingdom.
So, I mean, that is the practical outcome of the protocol. I truly believe that when the protocol was written, and it was written both by, in conjunction, the UK government and the European Commission, when that was written and agreed, everybody believed it would solve a problem, not create more. But it has created problems. There are goods that you can buy in England, Scotland and Wales that you cannot buy in Northern Ireland. And that simply shouldn't be the case in our single market. But the European Commission were worried that goods would flow almost unabated from the United Kingdom through Northern Ireland into Ireland and therefore the European single market. Now, we believe we can sort this particular problem out by sharing of data. The European Commission, their negotiator, a guy called Maroš Šefčovič, wrote an article for the Financial Times not so long ago saying there can be a solution along those lines. So I'm hopeful we can actually solve some of these problems and move forward.
About solving this nursing strike, the first time the RCN have done so in their 106-year history. Are you going to have to pay them more? The problem's going to get worse, isn't it? They're desperately short-staffed. They've got this huge COVID backlog, and patient safety is at stake in all of this.
So, I mean, it is really important that, firstly, I mean, you won't find a politician, I don't think, in the United Kingdom who does not believe that the NHS put in a really magnificent shift for the whole country during the pandemic. And actually, it's one of the reasons why nurses were recognised as the only group of public sector workers who got a 3% pay rise last year. It's why politics is taken out of these things by there being an independent public sector board to set pay levels, which recommended, excuse the sirens, recommended a 4 to 5% pay rise, which the government has agreed to. That's an average about £1,400. But the RCN, the Royal College of Nursing, who quote, want 17%. Now, that is a high ask given the economic times that we are in. And so I actually generally think all these things can be solved by dialogue, and it's really important that dialogue continues, because no one wants to see a strike. I'm absolutely sure of that.
Can I ask you just finally, Gavin Williamson has resigned from the Cabinet. He didn't last long, 2 weeks. Was it a mistake by the Prime Minister to bring him back? Didn't he have a bit of a reputation of being a master of the black art of political persuasion? He was a bit of a bully. Did he bully you?
Gavin Williamson was the chief whip. I've been a government chief whip. I think you have to do it by the art of 1,000 kindnesses to people and showing respect. Well, actually, maybe that didn't work for me, because I was a chief whip who actually lost their Prime Minister in the end. So, but yeah, Gavin Williamson has resigned. It was the right thing for him to do. The allegations are very, very serious, and so I'm pleased he did what he did.
Yeah, and they're not only bullying allegations being levelled against him. There's talk in The Guardian today about allegations of national security risks. And I just wonder, not only was Gavin Williamson a risk in himself, not only was it a lapse of judgment from the Prime Minister, but is there a problem with discipline within the Cabinet? Everybody seems to be leaking.
It's true.
Well, crikey, we've got to the stage where GB News are quoting The Guardian. I don't really know what to make of that.
Are you denying them? This is Penny Mordaunt, who has said she was forced to deal with a security leak during her time as Defence Secretary. So I'm quoting a Cabinet colleague of yours.
I'm afraid I do. I'm not going to comment on speculation. You'll have to ask Penny Mordaunt that question, because I honestly don't know anything about it.
But is there a problem with leaking within the Cabinet?
I'm hoping not, because I'm fairly full and frank in my exchanges in the Cabinet.
OK, well, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us.
Appreciate your time this morning. Secretary of State for Northern Ireland.
Well, we'll be back from 6 a.m. tomorrow. Well,
we won't. No,
I won't be. No, you won't be either. GB News Breakfast will be back from 6 a.m. tomorrow morning.
And I'll tell you who will be here. Tom Harwood is
exactly.
next.
And I'm going to be here, of course, if I can do my plug for my show, 12 o'clock on Friday.
Fabulous. I'll be watching. I promise. I'll be right there watching from home.
But now it's Tom Harwood with a briefing.
Yeah.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I could